This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Hope you had an awesome weekend and a very happy Mother's Day. I guess belated, but I hope all the moms out there had a great day yesterday, and hope all of you did some special things for your mom. Special shout out to my mom. She's overseas right now, but I'm sure they might check in on the show. So, Mom, love you. Hope you had a great one. It was a glorious weekend. Maybe for everyone other than the execs at Rogers in TSN, because there are no Canadian teams left in the Stanley Cup Playoffs after the Oilers and Toronto Maple Leafs were bounced from the playoffs all over the course of the weekend. We're going to get to that. Tommy Gazzola, our pal doing pre and post coverage for the Oilers in Edmonton, is going to jump on. We'll talk about the end of their season. And we're also going to get to the latest with the Bombers and the Jets off season with Jeff Hamilton coming up. We're going to do this a little bit later on, but the Athletic has also dropped their first off-season trade bait board, and no surprise there's some Jets content, although I'm not sure any of us would have had 4 of the top 8 names on the list being Winnipeg Jets. It starts with Connor Hellebuck and goes from there. We'll definitely hit on that as well. And, of course, there's a lot going on with the Winnipeg Ice, the Centennial Cup. And the Goldeyes started off their season in addition to a busy weekend of Bomber training camp. So going to be a very busy show. Great to have you all with us. And buckle up for a fun couple hours here to get going with another week of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you. We'll bring Remo in just a second. But I do want to thank the sponsors that make the show happen each and every day. Our friends at Coolbet Canada got a nice exclusive up at the exclusives for Game 7 tonight between the Stars and Kraken. We'll hit that a little bit later on. Of course, Princess Auto, Consolidated Supply, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, Breezy Bend, Aikens Lake, Little Brown Jug, Nick and Nicky DQ, F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, Vita Health, Canadian Club, Manitoba Battery, Aquatech, Modern Man, Assiniboia Downs, and those Winnipeg Goldeyes that have their home opener coming up on Friday night. We'll touch on that in a little bit as well. But welcome to everybody in the chat. Great to see you all. Hope you all had a great weekend. If you haven't already, you're finding us a little later on, make sure you hit that red subscribe button and join us daily, 1 o'clock p.m. Central, Monday to Friday for the live broadcast. And you can also on YouTube, of course, and you can find the audio podcast up around 3:30 in the afternoon, just in time for your ride home if you can't catch the show live. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, just search Winnipeg Sports Talk. Let's get Remis in here. Remo, how was your weekend? How was your Mother's Day for both your mom and the mom of your 2 little ones?
Yeah, I got my mother-in-law as well, and it was nice. Spent time with all of them. I had a nice breakfast and nice dinner. Got my wife a gift. Actually, she had been
involved
hinting
in the dinner. Before we talk about the gifts, were you involved in the dinner? Was this
No, we
ordering?
ordered in.
Did you go out? Oh, okay.
We
So
just
it was
ordered in. Went
You
out.
didn't force your wife to make her own Mother's Day dinner, though.
No,
That's
we
good.
got
Okay,
invited
that's
out.
good.
Invited out to my in-laws, so that was good. So it was great Mother's Day, and it was great weather too, which helped us though. And then I ended it off with the great 9 p.m. start. Wasn't that awesome? With one game on the schedule, 9 p.m. Come on.
That listen, we usually here on this program have a lot of time for the West Coast games. That was a joke. And I mean, listen, it just goes to show that regardless of the billions that Rogers Sportsnet paid to the National Hockey League, they are beholden to their U.S. television partners in ESPN. And Spectre had an interesting article on that because everyone was wondering, like, why in the world is this game starting so late on a Sunday with nothing else going on? And the only NBA playoff action was a 2:30 game between the Celtics and Sixers in Game 7 of their playoff series. Well, it was an ESPN game. ESPN has a much bigger money deal with Major League Baseball for Sunday Night Baseball. What was it? The Phillies and the Red Sox, I think. Or the Cardinals and the Red Sox. Cardinals, who were terrible this year, by the way, playing. So it couldn't be on ESPN. And I don't know whether this is true. I mean, I'll take it at face value because Mark Spector wrote about it in Sportsnet. But they couldn't move the game to ESPN because there was a previous commitment to cornhole.
No. What?
The American Cornhole Association had an event that was beginning at, I believe, 9 o'clock or 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central on ESPN2. So they had no choice. And to make matters worse, if you can believe this, Remo, the game went a little late. The baseball game went. Now, we didn't have this issue here in Canada watching it on the Canadian channels. But they joined the game late. They had to wait out the ninth inning of the game and joined it and missed the first 3 goals that happened in the first 3 minutes of the game yesterday.
Yeah, that's really sad. And, you thought, the NHL was getting a great deal here going to ESPN, and I think they've gotten a lot of exposure. But when you have Connor McDavid in an elimination game, the best player, and it has to be at 9 p.m., Central Time start, and that's 8 p.m. local time there. Something doesn't sit right about that, and a lot of people
figure it out. But
something's got to give there. They can't be in that situation. That's not good. Not good for the league. And a lot of people wondering, how does that game start at 9 p.m. when there's no other games on? That shouldn't happen.
No, it shouldn't. I'm sure they'll talk about it a lot at the meetings, but at the end of the day, they worked hard to get ESPN on with them. They obviously made some concessions. ESPN didn't want to trade the game to TNT. So there you have it. A 9 p.m. game at the end of a weekend on Mother's Day, where a lot of people have had busy days. And unfortunately, that was it for the Edmonton Oilers. Well, I guess unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you feel about it all. We'll get to the Leafs in a minute, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that team tomorrow in the aftermath. I know all their players are meeting with the media today on the annual garbage bag day, locker cleanout day. But here's the Not Autocorp question of the day for all of you, for our friends over at Waverly and McGillivray. Are you upset that both Canadian teams are out? Does it matter to you? This is often a conversation, Reem, that we hear every year. There's some people who go, I'm cheering for the Canadian team. Certainly, I joked last night that flags are at half-mast at Rogers HQ today after the Leafs were bounced out, and then it got even worse, although not as important, I don't think, to the folks at Rogers of the Oilers, but one of those teams. But there are some people that really like Canadian teams, and then there's others that, and I'll kind of put myself in this category, that, have one team that we support. And I'm not upset that the Leafs are done. I'm not upset that the Oilers are done. Listen, I am maybe a little more upset that the Oilers are done just because I would have loved to have seen McDavid and Draisaitl continue to play in the playoffs. Those guys are so much fun. But I'll tell you what, when the Jets came into the league, I made a bet with a couple of friends that the Jets would be the next Canadian team to win the Cup. And it's still alive right now. Frankly, if you had made that bet in 1994, that bet would still be alive right now. It is pretty incredible. We've had 4 Canadian teams make it to the finals. None of them have won. And it is now pushing 30 years since a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. Interested to know whether that is of importance to you or whether you don't care, or frankly, you might be happy, because God knows I would not have wanted to live in a world where we had to deal with Leaf fans telling us about their Stanley Cup championship, and I'll frankly put the Oiler fans in there as well.
Oh, Now that you brought the fans into it and having to hear them talk about it, then yeah, I don't care. But actually, for my personal interest, yeah, I'm kind of upset about it, Huss. I think these were two great stories. For the Toronto, I mean, they haven't won since '67. This is the core, very similar to the Jets. Been together for a long time and haven't been able to get it done in the playoffs. They did win a round, but now, as they had their exit meetings today, you wonder if there's going to be changes for them with a number of key players who are also have 1 year left on their deals. And for Edmonton, I don't know if this is, because they're a Canadian team, but I mean, McDavid Draisaitl was one of the best stories of the season. You have the Hart Trophy, or he's going to win the Hart Trophy. I mean, they put out the nominations, you kind of laugh at them, but they had 3 guys over 100-point season, the best power play of all time in terms of efficiency. And you thought, okay, we want to see the great players do great things, and now we don't get to watch the McDavid Draisaitl show in the playoffs. Now, if they played for an American team, would I be upset? I'm not sure, but I think you feel I think closer to those teams. Like, are you really excited about a possible Seattle-Vegas conference final? I'm not. I'd much rather see Edmonton. And in the East, I think Florida, Carolina, I enjoyed that matchup more. I'm really hoping Dallas wins for the better matchup, but yeah, I am a bit upset that there's no more Canadian teams. I don't know. I think you feel more of a connection, and now I think it's easier to not watch.
Well, okay.
Even if you hate Toronto, you're tuning in because you want to see them. You want to see them lose.
Listen, it certainly is more fun with teams that you actually care about one way or the other in them, and I think both of those teams that we just mentioned would fall into that category. But I'll say this, speaking of the Leaf hate, listen, I mean, I've kind of said, before, and I'm not a major Leaf hater, although I certainly cannot stand going to the arena when the Jets are playing the Leafs and there's all the Leaf fans there. And I've mentioned for a long time, the Leaf fans as a collective group are probably maybe the most delusional group in all of sports because, outside of right now, and I'm sure they're a little bit quiet, I mean, during the regular season or going into the playoffs, I mean, this is a group that carries themselves as if they are in the midst of a dynasty when they hadn't even won a playoff round since 2004. As far as the players go on the team, though, I mean, I'm a big fan of Austin Matthews. I think Mitch Marner's incredible. I love watching William Nylander play. And listen, I'll tune in and watch a game with them. And kind of to your point, I think they're better in and being around at least for a while than not. However, I didn't really grasp the level of kind of real anger and hate towards the Leafs until this weekend. And I'm glad you reminded me to tell this story, Reem. I'm at the Ice game, and we'll get to the Ice in a minute. Great weekend of games down at Canada Life Centre between the Ice and the Thunderbirds for the Western Hockey League final. And we were in the second intermission of Friday's game. And I was sitting along the lines. I bumped into a bunch of people and just having, a conversation with a bunch of people that are popping by. And by the way, shout out to everyone that came and said hi at the game. Great to see you all there. And I knew that further down the concourse, the Leafs-Panthers game was on one of the televisions. And you could see there was a lot of people that had crowded around the television to watch it. And at the time, it was 2-1 for Florida. And in the midst of our conversation, all of a sudden we just heard this collective groan that, and I mean, like I was outside section 104, and this TV was down in section 109. So we're talking about a long ways down the hall. And you could completely hear like, oh, what's going on? And I'm like, okay, well, something happened. And it was the Leafs scoring. Like there was absolutely this wasn't a split crowd. Like a bunch of people were happy and some people were upset. And I was taken aback at how almost unanimously negative it was that the Leafs had tied this game. Fast forward to after the game. We roll up to the Shark Club with a bunch of friends afterwards. We're going to have a couple beers and watch the end of the game and get into the Edmonton-Vegas game. When the Florida Panthers scored the overtime goal to eliminate the Leafs, I mean, you would honestly have thought that it was a Jets overtime goal in the playoffs. I mean, the place went absolutely nuts. And again, I get it. I mean, in my conversation with friends, certainly here in the chat, there's a lot of people that will consistently hate the Leafs, blah, blah, blah. And, there's a few that like them that are on there. But, I mean, this was just a random selection of hockey fans there for a junior hockey game. It wasn't even a Jet game. And I'm glad you reminded me because I wanted to bring that up today. And I'm not sure whether this is just where we are right now or where that was a little bit of a strange coincidence. But both in the game and outside afterwards, I mean, people could not have been more united against the blue and white. And obviously, they all got what they wanted because the place got a little more festive after that. They were already happy that the Ice had won their game, and the Leafs were off to the golf course.
Yeah, that's right. And I agree. People were watching that game because they hate the Leafs. It's crazy. And I did enjoy, number one Jets fan Jesse Pollock at Maple Leaf Square trolling everyone after the game by himself, chanting "We want Florida." And to be clear, that's trolling Leaf fans, not trolling the actual players. And yeah, I mean, I found it harder to dislike them the last couple of years because they have so many great players and they're fun to watch. However, those players haven't been able to get it done in the playoffs, time and time again. And we'll see if there's changes going forward. But that's a funny one about Shark. What are you, Shark Club?
Yeah, at the
and
Shark.
The
place went absolutely bananas.
Yeah,
and with the level of joy that one would expect from like the home team winning the game. Maybe there's just a lot of Paul Maurice fans there or something like that. I don't know, but it was quite the scene. It was quite the scene. So we'll talk more about this as we get in. Tommy Gazzola is going to come in. We'll also break down the end of the Oilers scene. I should mention the Ice right off the bat, Remo, as we get into this because it was a great hockey weekend. Awesome turnout for both games. I mean, 5,000 to 6,000, I'd say, for both Friday and Saturday. And a great start for the Ice in the game against Seattle on Friday night. And I have to tell you, for anyone that was at the game, will have felt this. I mean, as nervous a final 90 seconds I can remember. And I did think it boded well. It boded well for Seattle going into Saturday night's game. This game was 3-0 after the second period. Seattle scored very early in the third to make it 3-1. Ice held their own, did a very good job of keeping things out of letting Daniel Hauser see the pucks. And then they gave up another one. Was sort of about I'd have to check it out. Maybe 2 minutes, a minute and a half left. Holy smokes, did the T-Birds come on. I mean, there were a couple plays where, it got behind the goaltender, hit the post. You're wondering how in the world did they survive it? But they did. And credit to Winnipeg for doing exactly that. They got the win. They weren't able to get both home wins, though. Zach Benson, who continues to shine right now under the spotlight heading into hearing his name called, all in all likelihood in the top 10 of the draft in Nashville, had both goals for the Ice. But a big pushback, to use our favorite term on this program, from Seattle, and from Brad Lambert. And I'll tell you what, Jet fans, Brad Lambert looks phenomenal right now. I said to the guys I was sitting with watching the Seattle power play right now, and I mean, we'll see about 5-on-5 and playing against men. At 5-on-4, that guy could be on the Jet power play right now. And again, I don't want to get everybody's hopes up expecting that he's going to be, starting in the top 6 on day 1 of the season next year. But I will say this, his time as, a member of the Thunderbirds in the Western Hockey League after what had happened in his draft year and earlier on in the season with the Manitoba Moose, I think has been a great decision by the Jets organization to send him there. He is making the most of it right now. And we're going to get a chance to see these teams play the next 3 games in Seattle on TSN, and our guy Dan Robertson's going to be calling the games, Game 3 tomorrow night. So, I think good things are happening for Brad Lambert. This is going to be a great series. I'd be stunned if it didn't come back to Winnipeg for Game 6 and potentially Game 7. Would have loved to have had the Ice up 2-0, but 1-1 still. Great start to the series, and a lot of great hockey at the arena at Canada Life Center. And fingers are crossed they can keep the Ice in for a little more and see these teams go at it again with the championship on the line when the series returns.
Yeah, awesome to see. Great crowd. I think it was at least 5,000 at the games, each on the weekend. Canada Life Center. Brad Lambert, these were his numbers Has in the regular season 38 points in 26 games, and in the playoffs just hitting another level here in terms of points per game, 24 points in 14 games. And they did hit up that joint airplane with the divider, so they're not mingling. And
That's right.
and the Ice are practicing
front back or side to side. We still need to find out about how they did that.
I think front to back and maybe separate bathrooms, but Ice are practicing today at 3. The game's tomorrow. Kind of cool on TSN, and Dan Robertson giving the call for that one. So we'll be tuning in. There is a lot of hockey, as you said. NHL Canada also playing at the Worlds this morning against Slovakia. So, but how about the Ice as their quest continues? And I agree. I think this will go 6, potentially 7. So you might have to clear your calendars next weekend, or this weekend, I guess.
Yeah. And I think the games actually would be Monday and Tuesday for this schedule, if I'm not mistaken.
Sunday and Monday.
Oh, Sunday and Monday? Okay, excellent. So, hey, May long weekend for people that are kicking around the city. It'll be hopefully be some great hockey for us to watch. And tell you what, I don't think there was anyone that was at those games that didn't enjoy themselves and wouldn't be planning on coming back for a game 6 or game 7. So we could be seeing even bigger crowds, especially now with a little bit of lead time, and particularly if the teams split the first 2 games in Seattle. So you get to a 2-2 situation where you're guaranteed the game on Sunday. Although the fact that it is May long weekend may take a little bit of a hit. And hey, just while we're talking about junior hockey, the Centennial Cup's been continues on tonight, and a big shout out to the Portage Terriers, who won that game Friday night in the Battle of the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. Portage, the host team, taking out the Turnbull Cup champion Steinbach Pistons 4-2. Steinbach came back with a win last night. They lost their first game in overtime, so Steinbach has 4 points right now in 3 games. And they're going to need to beat a very, very good Battleford's team representing the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League team tomorrow night. Now, the one thing that might help the Pistons is the fact that Battleford plays the Portage Terriers tonight, and they'll be playing again the second night of back-to-backs. I believe each team gets 1 day off. This happens to be the Pistons' day off, and Paul Dick will be getting that team ready for a huge game playing for their tournament lives tomorrow. And all in all, Remo, I've spoken with a few people out there. Great crowds out in Portage right now, and people really, really impressed with the level of hockey at this Junior A championship right now. So, and I know that junior hockey, with everything else going on with 2 pro teams here in Winnipeg, maybe doesn't get the ink or the oxygen that maybe it deserves at times. But we had a great preview of that last week with Eric Swar from the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. They're very excited about the chances of both of their teams. Obviously, we've talked quite a bit about the Ice as of late on their playoff run right now. The pros have gone home, but right now in both Winnipeg and in Portage, there's incredible options for hockey fans to go out and see it live.
Yeah, full slate of games all day there at Portage La Prairie. So pretty awesome tournament. We got some great insight on it last week with Eric Swar from the MJHL. So Portage is in action tonight, 7:30 against Battlefords, and we've already got 1 game in the book. So yeah, if I was hanging out there, 11:30 a.m. start. It was Ottawa winning over Yarmouth.
Yeah, there's 11:30 games, 3:30 games, and 7:30 games every day. And these next 2 nights are the last couple of days, I believe, of the round robin. And one of the Manitoba teams is playing at 7:30 every night, whether it's Steinbach or whether it's Portage. And again, the 2 teams played head-to-head last Friday, heading into the weekend. So we've got lots more to get to, and we will tease again. Trade talk for the Winnipeg Jets. The athletic list is out. 4 of the top 8 guys on their offseason trade board of Winnipeg. And we'll maybe touch on that a little bit with Jeff Hamilton, but we'll go through it in more detail a little bit later on in the program. We are going to head to Edmonton right away. But as I mentioned, Goldeyes 1-2 after opening the series in Gary. They're off to Fargo tomorrow. But opening day is Friday, folks. Cannot wait for the first game of the season. Hopefully we get some great weather for it. It'll be a hell of a way to start off the weekend, and another great summer down at Shaw Park. We'll do a check-in with Andrew Collier on Wednesday, setting the stage for the weekend. But we can tell you tickets are on sale right now. Get them at goldeyes.com fireworks after the game. They don't do that always, but they'll be ready. And I can tell you the craft beer corner is going to be good to go. The Gold Eyes Grand Slamwich that Andrew told us about last time. You might need to get a big crew if you want to try that. But it's all systems go for baseball season here in Manitoba. You can check out more on the team at goldeyes.com. Season tickets, mini packs, all of that, and individual tickets. The season starts on Friday, and we will look forward to seeing you there. Our friends at Modern Man Barbershops are now open with 8 locations in Winnipeg, including their 2 newest locations on either Pembina Highway or Plessis Road. Modern Man Barbershops offer a variety of grooming services, including haircuts, beard shaping, shaves, color services, and more. Book your look and make an appointment online at modernmanbarber.com and give them a follow on Instagram at Modern Man Barbershop. So with this glorious weather, people are thinking summer right now, and why not make 2023 the year you take the plunge? Visit Aquatech at aqua-tech.ca to design your own custom pool. Their team can provide on-the-spot pricing from designers as well as financing options that suit you. And Whole Home Rentals started Aquatech as well with thousands of renovations. Let them upgrade any space in your home. Aquatech is ready to make your reno dreams a reality. Learn more about design, pricing, and financing options today at aqua-tech.ca. Well, spring is 100% here, and that means a couple things for Manitobans. One, it's time to get your motorcycles out and let the good times roll. And that grass is growing, and it's going to need to be cut. If you need a motorcycle battery, Donnie and his crew at Manitoba Battery can get you hooked up with the right fit for you at the best price in town. And if you need a lawn tractor battery, you can get one with 280 cranking amps for $42 when you return your core. That same battery's $30 more at the big box stores. And don't forget, Manitoba Battery is not only the best price, but they're certainly the most convenient. When you spend more than $60, they'll bring it right to your door anywhere in Winnipeg for free. To learn more, find them online at manitobabattery.com or pop down and see them at 1026 Logan Avenue. And well, they poured one out for the Oilers last night in Edmonton, and we'll give a big cheers to our next guest, Tommy Gazzola, with Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club, the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and WST. Of course, Bomber training camp going on right now, and it won't be long before Dusty's coming to Winnipeg to call games, and we're at the Princess Auto tailgate zone enjoying a little Canadian Club and ginger ale before CC and Ginger, now available 473 milliliter cans at Manitoba Liquor Marts and at beer vendors around the city. All right, let's head out to Edmonton right now. We knew the Leafs were done, but there were a lot of people hoping that the Oilers would survive at least to a Game 7. It didn't happen last night, and Tom Gazzola joins us now. Tommy, a fun run, but certainly that ended a lot earlier than most people in Northern Alberta were expecting.
Yeah, Huss, thanks for having me, first of all, and good to be back on.
Great to see you, buddy.
Hey, it is disappointing for Oil Country and the Oilers faithful, absolutely, but they lost to a really good team. They lost to the best team in the Western Conference, one of their rivals, and the Oilers were banged up like every team was in the postseason or generally is. And if you're not, obviously something's wrong with the way you're playing. And a lot of disappointment on the post-game show is how I would describe it. We did have a few of the extremes saying you got to trade one of those guys. But listen, a couple of things did the Oilers in the series. The 5-on-5 play wasn't good enough. The injuries we're going to find out about tomorrow when they have their last availability of the season. And you got to hand it to Bruce Cassidy and the Golden Knights. He put in a defensive system that really stymied the Oilers' offense at even strength, 5-on-5 in particular, kept them to the outside. And then when the Golden Knights had their opportunities, they struck. And there are a couple of things with the Oilers, bad habits that kind of crept back into their game. We saw them get exposed in the defensive zone, guys getting crossed up. I think of the first Marchessault goal in the second period last night. Draisaitl and Nugent-Hopkins not picking up Marchessault, recognizing too late that he had snuck down there. And Barbashev made a great redirection, hoping that a guy like Marchessault would be in front. And sure enough, that play connected. So There were some issues for the Oilers, some discipline issues in Game 5, and then a little bit, I think of Matthias Ekholm's penalty last night, where he didn't need to take that boarding penalty on Zach Whitecloud. So the Oilers kind of did themselves in some regard, and a lot of people debating about the goaltending, a lot of people wondering if Jay Woodcroft has been outcoached. Maybe, but it was a tight battle between really good teams, and the Golden Knights prevailed.
You know, when we do the autopsy of this series, Tommy, from the weekend, I mean, let's face it. I mean, the Oiler power play was historically good for the first 4 games, but it was a couple of those penalties you mentioned, particularly that careless high stick from Janmark that created the 5-on-3 that I thought started the undoing of the Edmonton Oilers. And it's great to be prolific on your power play, but you got to be able to kill a few too. And they did not do a good enough job on the weekend of that, did they?
Huss, not just on the weekend, but all season long. The penalty kill for the Oilers was bad out of the gate. And it kind of hovered in the 25, 26 range, and then put together a nice stretch in March and into April where, I think it went 7 games without allowing a goal on the PK. And then LA was able to crack it. The Golden Knights were able to crack it. And the Oilers have some flaws, and one of those things was the penalty kill. And first of all, stay out of the box. Don't take stupid penalties. That was a careless high stick from Janmark. It was a bad call right before that on Philip Broberg, where it was Jack Eichel that was holding on to Philip Broberg's stick, and there was a ref right there watching it. He was, 5 feet away. He didn't call it. And then you had Steve Kazari 80 feet away outside the blue line, giving the veteran Eichel the benefit of the doubt, saying that it was a hold. But that was the sequence that I think really did the Oilers in Game 5 and kind of led to their demise in Game 6 as well, because, they had the gusto. They were going to have their best game. They're going to stay alive, backs against the wall, all of those cliches. But as soon as the doubt crept in the second period, last night, they were done, very much so like they were in Game 5 as well, where careless use of the stick led to penalties. Then, you flash forward to yesterday, Matthias Ekholm buries Zach Whitecloud, like I mentioned, and they couldn't handle the emotional swings in the games too. Whenever they would score, it seemed like sometimes even LA did it. They would respond right back, and then the Golden Knights did that a whole bunch in this series. So those are tough lessons, and it should harden them in theory, but this is a team that has suffered some tough losses in the postseason. Think back to that series against Winnipeg where they got swept. And it also kind of highlights how tough it is to win in the NHL, especially in the postseason. But opportunity missed for sure. I think they'll be back next year. They're going to have some different faces in the lineup, certainly. But that's a tough pill to swallow. But the Oilers have them to blame as much as others. So a lot of people want to blame the refs, Huss. But it wasn't always just the refs.
Yeah, no. Listen, this Vegas team is damn good.
Yep.
They are built for the playoffs. Some would say they maybe have a unique advantage because of the salary cap that they're rocking with right now.
96 mil, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and again, listen, I don't – Mark Stone had back surgery. I mean, this wasn't a straight Kucherov move, but listen, they are getting the benefits of the timing of it, so do that with what you will. The interesting thing about this, and kind of from a Jets standpoint watching this series, is that in the 5-game series against Vegas, the Jets' power play actually popped. I mean, they got a lucky one that added to it, but I mean, I think the number was like 41 or 42%, which certainly in the second half of the season was not what you would think that the Winnipeg Jets were going to be getting on the power play. But at 5-on-5, especially after midway point of the second game, Tom, Vegas really controlled the 5-on-5 play. I was not thinking that they would be able to have that same sort of advantage at 5-on-5 against a team that has the likes of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And listen, they did so much damage on the power play early on in the series. I think it hid the fact of how effective Vegas was at 5-on-5. But I mean, hockey is a 5-on-5 game. You're going to get calls either way. And listen, if you're great on the power play, that's awesome. But you can't just rely on the man advantage to win. And I would imagine on your post-game show and in the aftermath of this, the big question is, like, what happened to the Oilers when they were playing at even strength? Because as far as the talent goes, they have the advantage, at least whenever those guys are on the ice.
When they won those games 2 and 4, they were excellent 5-on-5. They were physical. They hounded the Golden Knights defense. They won puck battles. They won races to pucks, Huss. And they were able to generate power play opportunities because the Golden Knights had to chase the Oilers, and they were the ones taking penalties. In the games that they lost, that wasn't the case necessarily. And I think, it's punctuated by games 5 and 6, where Edmonton was kept to the perimeter. Edmonton was losing the races. Edmonton was losing the puck battles. And the Golden Knights, you could say that they were hungrier. Maybe some of the Oilers were dinged up. You think of Evander Kane. He didn't have a particularly potent offensive postseason. He was banged up. He's hurt. We know that. Zach Hyman, same thing. Lower body. Charlie Horse, groin. We're going to find out for sure. Maybe that affected them 5-on-5 as well. But the system that Bruce Cassidy implemented, going away from the swarm that, Pete DeBoer had in the defensive zone, going to more of a zone and keeping the guys to the perimeter, it worked. It worked against Edmonton, especially in games 5 and 6. And it also it had the Oilers more stagnant as well. So the hunger, the system, Oilers injuries, those all factored into the 5-on-5 play. But Edmonton did have moments in games 2 and 4 where it took the play, created the momentum, set the pace of the game, and it was effective against the Golden Knights. The unfortunate thing for an Oilers' point of view is they didn't do that consistently, and Vegas was able to establish its game. Or, like we saw last night, after a good first period from the Oilers, the Golden Knights come out, and I thought that they played an immaculate second period, and they were able to stem and turn the tide, and kudos to them because they do have 3 really good lines, and then even their fourth line, a couple of bangers and crashers on there. Will Carrier has been a good vet for a long time. They inserted Teddy Bluger in the last couple of games, and Keegan Colasar was a physical menace, dirty or clean. He was a physical menace, and it worked. It really did work. And then, a save here, a save there would have gone a long way. I don't think that it would have mattered if Jack Campbell got the start. Just the way the Golden Knights played against the Oilers, I think he would have let in a few, regardless of if it was him or Stuart Skinner between.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you about the goaltending. I mean, certainly, compared to, from the difference between Winnipeg and some of these other teams, they might not have, the McDavid or Draisaitl, but their franchise player is their goaltender.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think everyone would have loved to have seen Connor make one more save that maybe would have changed that series. That didn't happen. But I have to admit, I mean, even with the season that Stuart Skinner had, I still had questions as to how that goaltending would last throughout a 2-month run if you're going to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And I think we got that answer. And it is crazy. I mean, the play of Skinner, I think in a lot of ways masked at least the whiff in year 1 of that contract that gave Jack Campbell. And it's very problematic going forward, Tom. I mean, if Jack Campbell's not going to be able to be a guy that you can play consistently and rely on, that is a major issue, having that, $5 million price tag on him for another 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Where do you think things are goaltending-wise going into this offseason? I mean, I guess both guys are signed. They signed Stuart Skinner to an extension. He's less money, but he would be the guy. But is that going to be part of it that has to be reevaluated and maybe see whether they can figure something else out? Although I'm sure they'd love to do it, but I don't think you're going to see many takers for that Jack Campbell deal.
No, I think Skinner, Campbell are your goalies for the next couple of years. And when you combine the two, I think they come in around $8 million, Huss, which is it's tolerable for 2 goalies, especially if they're kind of splitting the duties. We know Skinner's going to be the guy. We'll see how he responds next season. But this is something we talked about on the postgame show last night is, hey, he's a rookie. he's a rookie. Like, he's up for the Calder. That's great. He was an all-star. You could talk about the lack of depth in goaltending in the Pacific Division. That's understandable. But bottom line was he was an all-star this year. Because of him, the Oilers were able to put themselves into the position that they wound up with, and that was second in the division, chasing first against the Golden Knights. Jack Campbell had a really good January. He did. And then his game kind of tapered off again. And, I mean, the guy switched his goalie gear brands twice this season. That's unheard of. Like, you talking to any former goalie, Joaquin Gage is a resource we hear and use here in Edmonton a lot, and we hear from a lot. And he's like, that's insane to switch from using Vaughn to Brian's midseason, rebuilding your entire game, making Stuart Skinner play a full month basically while you figure it out is crazy. And then in the playoffs, he switched to Bauer pads. Like, Huss, I noticed it. I saw him last week, and I was like, Jack, Bauer now? And he's like, yeah, I've used them before. They feel a little bit similar to my Vaughn pads that I used forever. And, we'll see how it goes. And I'm like, okay, it's the playoffs, whatever works. I know Stuart Skinner's getting the starts, but that's crazy. Bottom line, though, whatever pads he's using next year, he's got to be better. His averages were bad. His win-loss record was good, but he had a good team in front of him mostly. And, Stuart Skinner, he learned some hard lessons in the postseason. He was spotty at times in the postseason. But having said that, Huss, Stuart Skinner was hung out to dry a lot by the Oilers, not just the defense, but the forwards as well. And defending as a five-man unit was a mega issue for the Oilers for the first 3 months of the season. It got better, but as the competition improved and got stiffer, especially in the playoffs, and tendencies were picked up and scouting reports came in from the Kings and the Golden Knights on how you can crack the Oilers defensively, those bad habits, those issues popped up again. And regardless if it was Skinner or Campbell between the pipes, they were facing 10 bell chances. And, as we watch in the NHL, when you've got grade A scoring opportunities and you're as skilled as these guys in the National Hockey League, a lot of times you're going to score. Whether you're Connor Hellebuck, Jack Campbell, or Stuart Skinner, you can't give up those types of opportunities.
I imagine there was quite a bit of discussion on the post-game show as to where Ryan Nugent-Hopkins went in this series. I mean, the Nuge had that incredible triple-digit point season. What did he have, 2 points in the series or in the playoffs?
He had 11 points in the playoffs. Huss, not surprisingly, most of those came on the power play on that historic 45% power play that it finished up at after 12 games. Yeah, he was a passenger on too many nights. He really was. And where Nugent-Hopkins is at his best is when he's moving his feet. Matt Cassian, who's our analyst at 1260, calls it playing with intentionality. Nugent-Hopkins didn't do that enough in the playoffs. Now, in Game 4, where he scored his first goal of the postseason, he had a big night, multi-point game. He was moving his feet. His butt was in gear, and that looked like more of the Nugent-Hopkins that we saw pick up 104 points in the regular season. I know a lot of those points are on the power play. Huss, those are points regardless if they're a secondary assist or not. He made some great plays this year. He worked his tail off to get to 100 points, and in the postseason, it wasn't there. And I thought, personally, watching him in the first round against a tough, feisty LA Kings team that was built to face the Edmonton Oilers and defeat the Edmonton Oilers, you knew Todd McLellan was going to start scheming for the Oilers as soon as they lost Game 7 in round 1 last year. And the Oilers still got the better of LA, but Nugent-Hopkins, I thought that was a series that, he A, had a lot of tough nights, and B, maybe wasn't suited to his style of game. And as soon as they got to Vegas, I thought, okay, there's going to be more run and gun. This is where Nugent-Hopkins might have a little bit more room to wheel and deal. Most nights, that wasn't the case. He wasn't there. He wasn't good enough. And he wasn't the only one, too. There were some others that were passengers that they could have used more from. But, yeah, Nugent-Hopkins, a tough postseason. And it's been weird because he's kind of Jekyll and Hyde in the playoffs. Last year, pretty good in the postseason. The year before, not so much. The bubble year, not so much. So it's been frustrating, and he's been called out by a lot of people among the Oilers faithful.
Well, he's signed until the end of the 29 season. Zach Hyman signed till the end of the 28 season. You wish we were talking about Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl being signed that long. Of course, they're not. McDavid has 3 more years on his $12.5 million contract, and Draisaitl has 2 more on the incredible bargain that he's providing that team at 8.5. These guys will be back. I mean, obviously, I don't think there's any question. But, I mean, I just want to get your sense of the urgency for the organization to make something happen in the next 2 years while they have assurances and guarantees they have both of these players. Because to be honest, to have 2 superstars like that, arguably the top 2 players in the league on the same team, is a luxury that, I mean, does not come around very often, to say the least.
Yeah. Well understood within the organization. They know that there's a fire lit under them from ownership to get this done. The fan base certainly expects it. That's why this loss stings, because as soon as Colorado went down, as soon as Boston went down, people's eyes just lit up here. And I'm sure people in Vegas, same thing. Dallas, same thing. I mean, you saw a path to the Stanley Cup final, potentially hoisting the cup as well. Those guys they'll sign here. They'll re-sign. It'll be for more money, obviously. The cap should be up by then. Whoever the GM at the time is, there's already some rumblings about Steve Stais, who was brought in as a special advisor in the offseason, and he's kind of pegged as the next guy. That'll be his issue, obviously, or whoever does take over for Ken Holland, who's got 1 year left on his contract. But you have Nugent Hopkins in his prime. You have Hyman in his prime. You have Kane in his prime. You've got Matthias Ekholm for a couple more years. You've got Darnell Nurse in his prime. You've got Cody Ceci in his prime. You've got a burgeoning goalie in Stuart Skinner that you hope takes the next step to put himself into the upper echelon. So the next couple of years are absolutely crucial. There is another wave of prospects coming up. We're going to see Dylan Holloway be a full-timer next year. We're going to see maybe a Raphael Lavoie get a look. They have a really skilled right winger in Xavier Bourgault, who just played his first AHL season. So the time is now. Everybody recognizes it. And like the Colorados of the world, like Pittsburgh was years ago, like Chicago was a few years ago, they recognize and understand that they got to get something done, but it can't happen every year. That's how good this league is. But they better be back. They better be back with a vengeance next season. I think they will be, knowing the guys and talking to them and getting their grasp of the situation. But it's an opportunity missed, unfortunately. And it also highlights how tough it is to win in this league, no matter what.
Well, and I'll say this, while, listen, there's going to be an interesting offseason in Edmonton. The one here in Winnipeg might be the most explosive and fascinating in the entire league. And then, of course, the other Canadian team that got bounced on the weekend, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Mm-hmm. I mean, this story with Matthews, and again, I haven't heard what Matthews had to say today. He's going to be speaking a little later on, but I mean, it's kind of come out that he's got a full no move on his contract beginning on the 1st of July. So you got to be figuring out whether it's Kyle Dubas making these decisions and then figuring out whether they're going to be able to keep that player long term, because if not, the minute you get to July 1, he can just play it out, head straight to free agency and call his own shot. And that's going to take, there was already a lot of angst in Toronto to begin with around that team that has basically been hanging around for a number of decades. But holy smokes, if that goes into Matthews playing out his contract next year, you can only imagine what the talking heads will have for that.
Yeah, it's. I know us in Western Canada like to look at Toronto and kind of have a chuckle, but they do have a pickle on their hands. They really do. And if you were to say, "Hey, Tom, would you bet on Austin Matthews leaving or Connor McDavid leaving?" I'd say it's likelier that Austin Matthews is the guy that leaves. He's an American guy. Toronto's a tough market. I know that people joked about Connor McDavid wanting to bolt for Toronto. I think if he would hypothetically do that, I mean, he's putting himself into a tougher situation. He's best friends with Leon Draisaitl. He's best friends with Darnell Nurse. They recognize that they have something here potentially special. They're getting some results. They have won some series in recent years. There is a belief within the group, and especially after last season, Huss, I was told that McDavid and Draisaitl, whatever question marks that they had about the organization and the direction of the team, last year's run restored their faith. And I think this year, even though they struck out in the second round, I don't think it's been diminished. I think that they understand that they could do something and make some noise and potentially turn it into a Stanley Cup. If these guys want to take off and leave in the middle of their careers, that tells us, A, that Stanley Cup isn't their priority and running for the money is. I don't get the sense that that is the case from these two. And basically, if one of them were to leave, you're starting all over again. How many situations can you just plop what will be a $15 million player and just say, yeah, you're going to just join a superstar stacked team that's ready to contend? That doesn't happen in this NHL. So they know that the situation, if they truly want to win, is here. And they're going to be provided with all the weapons necessary around them to make it happen.
You know, just on that Matthews topic, I'm just getting this in from Remo here. So Austin Matthews did speak today. He said, my intention is to be here and sees a long-term future and would like to sign an extension before next season. So the fact that he said that publicly, I presume he said it privately, you know, whether they get that deal done and they announce it on the 1st of July, I mean, I think to go move forward, they need to have that assurance that they're not going to get left holding the bag, and that will mean that he won't be on the Athletics trade bait board along with half of the members of the Winnipeg Jets, it seems right now. Hey, Tommy, before we go, you've seen a lot of the Seattle Kraken this year being in the Pacific Division. How surprised are you that they are where they are right now? And what do you think about this Game 7 tonight between the Kraken in their second year and the Dallas Stars?
Buckle up for tonight, because that was a great Game 6 that they played. They schooled the Stars, and it's been funny watching those two teams go back and forth. The Kraken, I think, like many, I didn't think would have an outstanding year like they did. I didn't think that they would make the playoffs. I thought that they would be more competitive. I remember when they
beat the Avs in 7.
No, and like us, we know that the Avs weren't the same Avs from the year before. They had some turmoil with Nichushkin in the middle of the playoff. That's brutal. That sucks. And you lose. You don't even have your captain all season. So they took advantage of a good situation. But I remember the first preseason game the Oilers played against them when the Kraken came to town, and I was just looking down the roster, and I was like, there aren't any bad players on this team. Like, it's all pretty good players. There's no superstars. Maybe Matty Beniers becomes one. But, like, everybody's pretty damn good, and they work hard, and they've clearly bought into Dave Haxtell's system, and they've had the goaltending be adequate, even though you look at, like, Martin Jones and Philip Grubauer, and you're like, not great, but good enough. And so I'm very surprised that they are where they are, and it's credit to them because they hustle for everything they get. They pour every ounce they can into making sure that nothing's left in the tank at the end of the night. So this is a great experience for them. I think that they upset the Dallas Stars tonight? No, but hell of a run, and it's been fun to watch them, and good on them. Will they be back next year? Probably, because every time you discount them, I remember they started a 7 or 8 game road trip in Edmonton, and the Oilers had just crushed them in Seattle a couple nights prior, and they won like 8 of the next 8
They won
games.
every game on that road trip. They went 9-0. I think it was the first time in NHL history a team had actually done that.
And it started in Edmonton, and I'm like, what the heck just happened? And they went into Boston. It was like one of the few regulation losses the Bruins had on home ice, and anytime you discount them, they kind of, show you by sticking their nose up at you and say, oh yeah, watch me, and good on them. They're feisty, they're plucky, and they deserve all the credit in the world. But it might end tonight, that Cinderella run. If I'm wrong, so be it.
Tommy, great having you on the program, pal, and great job. I always enjoyed tuning in after the games to see what was happening in Edmonton with the callers and everything else. Enjoy a few days off after a real busy playoff run, and hopefully maybe you'll have a little bit more time to jump on with us this summer. We'll definitely be hitting you up.
Hey, CFL right around the corner, baby. I'm looking forward to covering the Elks in the league, and anytime you want me, Huss, always happy to hop on.
Hey, this what will the celebration be like for that home win?
It'll almost be like
Like the Leafs winning the Cups in ¡67. It's been that long.
Yeah, well, there's going to be riots in the street. I think it'll be one of those ones where it's like, and everyone rejoiced and they're like, yay. But it'll be a relief. I mean, October 12th, 2019, way too long ago for a home win for the green and gold.
Hey, buddy, have a great one. Say hi to Dusty. We'll catch up soon. And I imagine for folks that do want a little bit more on the Oilers finishing up the season, I'm sure you guys will have a few season enders for the Oil stream over the course of this week as well.
We will, Huss. We always do. So looking forward to wrapping up this season and then getting going with football.
Take it easy, pal. Enjoy the PGA as well this week. We got a major to talk about in a couple of days. Good stuff. There's Tom Gazzola, great friend of the program. He does the Oil stream with my pal Dustin Nielsen. You can find that wherever you get podcasts. And pre and post for Oilers and Elks over on TSN 1260. We're going to bring it back local with Jeff Hamilton for the Winnipeg Free Press. But before we do that, hey, if you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, pop by one of 7 Vita Health Fresh Market stores or online at myvita.ca. When you order online, you can now choose same-day local delivery. Just place your order at MyVita before 11 a.m. and you'll get your order that day. Orders placed after 11 a.m. will be delivered the next day. And of course, when you shop at Vita Health, you're supporting a great local company, family owned and operated since 1936, and carrying Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products too. With barbecue season here, get on the delicious Vita Market grass-fed bison and beef steaks. And if you need a little help digesting things, check out the Health First Prime Zyme digestive enzymes available right now at Vita Health Fresh Market, 7 Winnipeg locations, and online at myvita.ca. How'd the fence and the garage weather the winter, folks? Well, if you got some issues in those departments, talk to our friends at Wallace & Wallace, Winnipeg's fencing and overhead door specialist, serving residential and commercial customers since 1946. We've got all sorts of fences: vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood. And if it's time to replace your garage door, Wallace & Wallace has Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors. Easiest way to get at them is to give them a buzz at 204-452-2700. They can make an arrangement to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them online at wallacefences.com or wallacedoors.com, or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Road off of Kenniston. And with the change of the seasons, folks, how's the closet looking? Guys, if you need to up your menswear game heading into spring and summer, do it over at F Apparel at 190 Smith Street downtown. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. Got a 15% discount for wedding parties, and of course, a free custom shirt and tie for any 2023 high school grads purchasing a new suit. 190 Smith Street downtown is where you can find F Apparel. Find out more or make an appointment online at ephaapparel.com. And I know one place that was very busy this weekend, and it was any of the 4 Nick and Nicky DQs, because the weather was gorgeous. I think we're getting up to, 29 today, apparently. Great time to pop down, check out those new summer blizzard flavors. Maybe pick up a few dilly bars or Buster bars for the freezer. And, of course, if you're hungry, check out those stack burgers as well. 4 locations: DQ Northgate, Polo Park, St. Anne's, and DQ Niverville. Hit them up online at DQ Manitoba if you need a ice cream cake or blizzard cake for an upcoming party or event. All right, let's welcome in the Hammer, back on the Bomber beat and back at training camp. Jeff, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
Not too bad, Huss. Feeling okay. Football season. Summer came early. We just decided to skip spring. Got a bit of crappy weeks there, and now we're feel like we're cruising into summer. So how can I complain?
No doubt about that. I mean, I was talking to Andrew Collier about this, and I mean, we're hoping this carries through till the Gold Eyes home opener on Friday. But I mean, the Fish had never had weather like this pretty much in their existence for the opening of their camp. And I imagine it almost sort of felt like mid-season on the weekend when Bomber camp got going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was piping hot. I mean, I feel like the Gold Eyes are just going to get the bad luck of May Long Weekend, as we always get poured on May Long Weekend. But hopefully, Mother Nature has different plans. But yeah, it was certainly nice to see. I mean, even last week, right? I mean, for rookie camp when they got out on the field on Wednesday, I mean, those 3 days were piping hot. I mean, I rode my bike to the practices I covered, and I've never done that before. Definitely got some sun in the stands, and yeah, it definitely feels like mid-season form, and the Bombers don't look too far off given how many bodies they have back this season. It's it kind of made for one of the more boring rookie camps, but certainly an exciting training camp as the boys get back on the field and get ready to I guess this season's being dubbed as unfinished business. That seems to be the biggest takeaway, obviously, after last season's disappointing loss to Toronto in the Grey Cup. But certainly a lot of familiar faces, and no reason to think that this team shouldn't be, on the precipice of another great year.
Well, I looked this up while you were talking there. I mean, for folks that are thinking about going out to Bomber Camp or the Gold Eyes on Friday and the weekend, check out this week. Sunny and 29 today, sunny 26 tomorrow, 29 and sunny with a bit of cloud on Wednesday, a little cooler Thursday, Friday, but 22 and 21 and sunny. And then the weekend, May Long weekend, the cursed weekend, 28 and sunny on Saturday and 30 and sunny on Sunday.
Let's go. Smiling.
Hey,
how can you not smile towards that?
After that winter and the early part of what was supposed to be spring, we've definitely earned it. So a great opportunity to get out and see the boys of summer back, whether you're a football or baseball fan or both.
Start inviting some Jets prospects down to the city. Making them fall in love into the city. You like what it's like in May? Come check it out in July and August. Then get them out of here by the end of the May Long weekend. Ship
Bring
them
your
out
agent.
Of here.
Bring your agent. As far as camp goes, obviously they had the rookie camp, and a number of players kind of came in. Some made it through. Obviously, Michael O'Shea Jr. was not part of the team that was at the main camp. Yeah. But I mean, when things got going, because of what you'd alluded to, I mean, how similar this team is personnel-wise, at least of the main players. Was it different at all this year, knowing how far ahead they probably are as a team than maybe they would have been in seasons past? Or Mike O'Shea has a plan. This is how we start the season. This is what we do on day one. This is what we do on day two, and just following the script that he has for his team.
I think it's much of the same script, but being, working on the same script, right? Improving on the same script. As far as momentum goes, I mean, if you look at last year's camp, I mean, they were coming off back-to-back titles. I mean, yes, there was the 2020 season that was canceled, but they were still back-to-back championships. So, and the fact that they lost last year, so to go 3 in a row, I think, the mood was, I think, early on, right? I mean, how many of these guys were thinking about that loss leading up to this camp? Well, probably not a whole bunch of them, but certainly were asked about it and talked and spoke about, some of that lingering taste in their mouths. So, maybe there's a little bit of added emphasis, a little bit of added importance to it. But as far as like game plan goes, it's been much of the same thing really since Mike O'Shea's been on the scene, right? I mean, you take what you learn from year to year. Obviously he's been here now for years, start of his own, 3-year deal ultimately. And so, another 3-year deal. So like for him, I mean, it's just fine tuning some of the things that you learned from previous years, as I keep saying, and what I mean by that is injuries, right? How you deal with injuries, how you deal with load management for veteran players. Like, you have Big Hill not taking as many reps on day one. Big Hill doesn't need to go balls to the wall on Sunday of opening camp, right? I mean, so I think you try to do is you blend a little bit of because what you're trying to get out of training camp is healthy. I mean, that's really what it is, right? I mean, the last thing you need is pushing guys too hard. I mean, obviously the guys that are going to be competing for spots, they're going to be going all out on, every opportunity they have. You don't need some of your veterans, a lot of whom are, getting up there in age to kind of go, from 0 to 60 on day one. We know with training camps, a lot of hamstring injuries occur. We definitely got a healthy dose of Achilles injuries last year. I don't know if we're going to see much of that this season, or you hope the training staffs have learned from that. But I think everybody is just eager to get back on the field, but it's the responsibility of the training staffs, the coaching staffs, to ensure that they're doing so safely and doing so in a way that's building on, towards the regular season, because as important it is to get fine-tuned in training camp. I mean, you can look at this roster. There really is no. I mean, there might be some surprises. Let's not rule that out. Let's not count any of the newcomers out. You know, we might have the new DeAndre Alford or the new Dietrich Nichols in the secondary, and so you don't want to just give the starting positions to incumbents. But there really isn't a lot of battles, right? And so I think that's what makes it a little bit easier on the Bombers, is that you're not really looking for chemistry, whether that's in the secondary, whether that's among receivers, whether that's amongst the O-line or D-line. You already have that built-in chemistry, so you get to you literally hit the ground running. A lot of these guys are best friends too, so they've spent a lot of their off-season together, working out together, watching tape together. So it really is a prime position for Mike O'Shea and company for training camp, because you have not only a lot of guys returning, but you have a leadership core that you can rely on. You have pretty much everything you can rely on so that you can execute your plan. And that's obviously what we'll see here through the next 3 weeks.
Hammer, and again, folks should check out the Winnipeg Free Press, because Jeff's got a pretty in-depth training camp preview for the event that, of course, started yesterday. But focusing on the offense right now, you lose Greg Ellingson, but you add Kenny Lawler. Everyone else is pretty much back. I mean, I guess when you look at Michael Couture, his loss could be when you look at offense right now, right at the start of camp, how many positional battles really are there right now that, could be determined over what happens in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, not many. You have, if anything, the battles are pushing the starters. And so clearly you have your quarterback situation wrapped up as far as who your number one is. Drew Brown's been a pretty, I still think the jury's out on him, but, he's certainly been a guy who's developed well in that number 2 spot. Another year for him, certainly, to take a next step. It'll be interesting to see what he does. I suppose you could say there's a battle out there for short yardage amongst quarterbacks, right? With Dakota Prukop no longer in the mix. He was an important piece, and we know the value that the Bombers place on that short yardage position. It's not just a guy to put his head down and crash through a couple of yards. They often have the guy throwing a lot of trick plays, right? Prukop played that to a T, and obviously.
Hey, just on that, there was a whole bunch of quarterbacks. None of them any of us had ever really heard of before. Did anybody come out of rookie camp maybe with a leg up on the other guys that were newbies? Obviously, assuming that Drew Brown is the backup.
Not really. But the rookie camp, a lot of that stuff, the short yardage stuff, that gets executed kind of against the big boys. So I don't think, as much as I mentioned that battle, we really have no idea at this point. That certainly wasn't a focus. I don't think they were looking to identify. I'm sure they have identified guys based on size and whatnot, but over the three days of rookie camp, even over the last couple of days of training camp, or the 1 day of training camp on Sunday, again, obviously today, but I don't think there's any clear-cut leader in that department. That will all come to play. That will be executed in the preseason games when they get some quarterbacks in, and we'll see who can win that job. I also don't think that Drew Brown is out of that job. Does he have the speed? I think he has speed. I don't think he's as fast as Prukop. He's not as big as Prukop, but you don't necessarily need to be the biggest guy either. A lot of short yardage isn't, while I think it is certainly a strategy that if you do have the size, you use every last bit of it to push that line. But if you already trust your line, and you have a smaller that can, smaller quarterback like him, Drew Brown, then you can maybe find some holes. So I wouldn't even rule him out of it. I just think you're looking at probably a guy with a little bit of a different skill set, maybe bigger, but Drew Brown's got the arm, and he's got the legs. So if he can roll out and make some plays on short yardage, he could be equally as dangerous. I'd be curious. I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet. I'd be curious what he thinks about that spot being open, because Prukop did have a lot of reps in that. But I think that answer will certainly be figured out over the next 3 weeks here. The other battles, like I said, it really comes down to where's the need. Receivers. There's going to be a battle between. I think there's a real battle between Carlton Agudosi and Rasheed Bailey, right? Agudosi played very well in the one game, right, that he got into. The 7 catches, I think it was 70 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a win over Calgary. That was an impressive run. And it's not just the one performance that have guys calling him the likes of athletic freak and all these things. He's a big target, and he's a big piece that if you're going to draw a lot of attention towards the Kenny Lawlers and the Dalton Schoens and the Nick Dembski, might be nice to have a Carlton Agudosi there who can be another playmaker. Nothing against Rasheed Bailey. I just don't think, obviously being American, that would be the battle for it. And the other thing about Rasheed is with the new rules in the CFL, Mike O'Shea kind of dismissed it a little bit, but he qualifies as one of those guys who can play 49% of reps for Canadians because he's been with the Bombers as long as he has. So if they want to take out a Drew Wolitarsky and put, Rasheed Bailey in for half his snaps, that's a possibility. So there's a lot of opportunity there, even though there might be a bit of a battle. I mean, you look at the linebackers, position. Kyrie Wilson starts on a 6-game list. So is Malik Clements. Is he the guy that played well in his replacement? Is he he's probably likely the guy to be a weak side linebacker? But here's the thing: much like DBs, a weak side linebacker is one of the positions that's leaned on heavily by the scouting department to find a gem. So there might be with the benefit of an off season here, there might be a couple guys that they like in that position who might just become another Kyrie Wilson. And the other thing too with Wilson, as great as he has been for the Bombers, he didn't play last year, and he's coming off an Achilles injury, and that's pretty that's significant, obviously. So there's certainly going to be a battle there. There's a couple spots in the secondary with maybe the halfback position on the field side. I mean, that's looking right now to be a battle between Jamal Parker and Evan Holm, two guys that both played well in relief last season. But again, what's to say there isn't another diamond in the rough that comes out of that camp, and he's some guy starts balling out, and all of a sudden we again have another D. Alford who's talking the NFL the next season. So those are the kind of the two positions, if you will, that are heavily leaned on to have a cheaper spot. So so obviously your scouting staff needs to be working hard in that position, but everywhere else, for the most part, the D line, I mean, there might be some depth in behind Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat to figure out. We know that Jackson Jeffcoat has struggled to stay healthy for the last couple of years. So they're probably going to need a little bit of help there. Theodric Hansen is still months away from returning from his Achilles injury. So it's going to be a time before he gets back into rotation. So there is some opportunity there. That's what I would stress. There's a lot of opportunity. I don't know if there's a lot of starting positions that are up for grabs. But again, you're not ruling out anybody, and we'll see what happens. Injuries are also play a role. And so we're only on day 2. Lots can happen between now and June 9th.
Exactly. Yeah. We're talking about a fully healthy team, which is very rare throughout any point of an 18-game regular season.
Totally.
Hammer, you mentioned the new rules, and I hadn't thought about it as well, and basically until you just mentioned it. But it reminded me of a question I gave to Kyle Walters the last time we spoke, and I just simply asked him, this sounds logistically difficult to manage and count. How is that going to work? And he goes, great question. I have no idea. Do you have any idea? I mean, how that is going to work? I mean, essentially counting snap count for all these players is a Canadian, he's coming in. I mean, I understand what they were trying to do with it, but I have major questions as to how this is going to be adjudicated throughout games in the CFL this year.
Yeah, so that's why I kind of went, because I figured you were heading down that avenue of getting me to explain. Not to be a cop-out, but if the general manager of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers doesn't have a clue, then I feel like I'm kind of the same department. I'm sure they have some people that are, first of all, it's about identifying who's eligible, right? There's only an X amount of players on each team that would be eligible. And I don't think it would be all that difficult to have a Rasheed Bailey, for instance, play, as long as maybe you count the Canadian snaps first, right? You count the snaps, the total snaps in a game, and then you count how many, the Canadian played, and then you can deduce from there how many an American played, right? Or Rasheed Bailey in this instance would have played. So I think it's definitely doable. I mean, dude, I still think it's one of the challenging things to figure out the ratio. Let alone the 49 snaps. I mean, how's to guarantee any of that play in a single game, whether you have the 7 starting Canadians? Like, if you play another guy in a position or you rotate somebody else in, like, how do you equate for that? I mean, it's a science that
and game management too. I mean, from a coaching standpoint, knowing what's going on. And I guess the other question is, I mean, what happens if at the end of the game they add up the numbers and Rasheed was 55% and not 49?
Then you have to determine if he played the reps alongside, Drew Wolodarski, again, we use him as an example. Yeah, I mean, again, it's not, you can create as great rules as, you can fight for as great rules as possible. Last time I checked, the CBA wasn't even signed yet. So I don't know. So I think that's one of the quirky things with the CFL. And while I don't have a great answer for you, I guess all I can do is trust that, somebody is out there counting bodies and reps and ensuring that whatever rule they put in place, it's being followed. Because like I said, even the Rouge is tough to follow at times.
This is usually a bit of a throwaway question after 1 or 2 days of training camp, but did anyone sort of stand out? I mean, even for guys that had been back before, holy smokes, this guy came back, he's 25 pounds heavier, or is this is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers? They're back, they look good, and let's get on with it.
Yeah, a little bit of both, I suppose. But like, you just kind of see guys that it's more looks, right? Like, you want to see how these guys look. Like, Brandon Alexander looks thick, you know what I mean, in a good way. Like, he looks, he's a muscular guy anyways. But as you know, I mean, he went through his knee rehab last year. Didn't play until September, so didn't really get a training camp, and probably wasn't spending a whole bunch of time from head to toe, and much of his focus would have been on his knee and rehabbing that. He looks bigger and thicker and ready to go. Look, I wasn't at practice today. Outside of that, it was Sunday. So you're looking at one day, and they were kind of being cautious with a lot of different players. They certainly weren't, did they hit the ground running? Sure, in a lot of ways they did, but they're not going to be throwing out their, the intense one-on-one battles. I think this is get guys on the field, get them acclimated to, what the practices are going to look like here for the next little bit. And, I think that intensity only ramps up over time, and especially once they get the pads on, right? I mean, that's kind of when you really hear it and see maybe guys separate themselves. But at this point, certainly, Zach Collaros looks good. A lot of the usual suspects looks good. Willie Jefferson doesn't look like he's slowed down any bit. I wouldn't, even though Big Adam Bighill had his reps limited, I have all the trust in the world that he has showed up ready to go. I think those answers to that question will certainly come here in the next little while, but maybe not for the first 48 hours.
Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press with us, talking a little Blue Bomber camp, and we should get into quickly the Jets off season. After this, Remo and I are going to go through this athletic trade bait board, and we're always here for trade bait boards or free agency rankings.
Sure.
But 4 of the top 8 guys on this list are members of the Winnipeg Jets right now, which kind of gives you a feeling. This is not done by Murad or people here in Winnipeg. These are Michael Russo and people far outside of it. I know we kind of touch on this each and every week, but there's a number of teams that are now out that have their own big questions to answer, Jeff. It starts with Hellebuyck. He's number 1 on this list. How do you see this playing out right now? And I guess, I mean, listen, we know the way the Jets operate. I mean, we'll sort of get some information at some point randomly that they've spoken or things are going well, or maybe that there is a deal. But are you still of the opinion that Hellebuyck conversations take place first, figuring that out, and everything else sort of falls from there? Or, as this list almost indicates, a bunch of guys are moving out. Hellebuyck's just part of the possibilities. He might be a guy that the team feels they have a better chance to keep, but the phone lines are open, as they say at Jets HQ in the GM's office.
Yeah, I mean, 4 of the top 8 on their trade bait board, or any newsrooms or broadcasts or whatever. I think you're gonna have those 4 players easily in your top 10, because they're 4 for the most part. Maybe outside of Blake Wheeler, who has a very difficult contract to get rid of even for a year, and we've seen that the Jets haven't exactly been willing to eat half of it for, I think, a player they think is still of value, probably not $8 million value, but still has value, as we saw in the playoffs here, at least to the first round. But I'm not surprised at all to have those 4 guys on there. And I mean, at this stage, I mean, we are getting dangerously closer to the draft next month. And while there's still certainly time, I think what we talked about this last week, we talked about this the week before. It's about finding out what exactly each player wants. And I think when you looked and you heard from Connor Hellebuyck and his his season end interview, that did not look like a guy who was probably coming back or signing a long-term extension. And maybe not coming back isn't the right term, but the fact is, if he doesn't sign an extension, he shouldn't be coming back next season. He should be traded. I would not be surprised if those conversations have started. I certainly would not be surprised if the conversations over Pierre-Luc Dubois, particularly with Montreal, have started. Perhaps other teams around the league. Teams are calling about Connor Hellebuyck. You look at this playoffs. You look at teams like Boston. You look at teams like New Jersey. Could they not use a guy like Connor Hellebuyck? Absolutely. And so, when you look at their playoff runs and where they fell short, they're probably looking at a goaltender as being that one key ingredient to helping them out. Whether that gets done, if you're looking at timelines right now, it'd be crazy not to think the timeline isn't the trade deadline. That's when things get really interesting. Obviously, not just whether you're trying to collect draft picks for this season or for future seasons, or whether you're trying to get players. I think the Jets, if you're led to believe what some of the reports from whether it be Darren Dreger or others that kind of obviously have close ties to the team and deliver messages through them. They're not really looking for a rebuild, but how long have we been saying this, that they don't really control the ship anymore? Their rebuild could very well be determined on whether any of those four players want to return. It looks like three of them probably aren't signing all of them aren't probably signing long-term extensions, but three of them are still very much in the, different stages of their career, but still have plenty of years left to contribute where they want to sign their next long-term deal. If that's not in Winnipeg, well, you're probably, I think it would be derelict of duty to go into the season with any of them on expiring contracts. We know that doesn't bode well for the teams, and that certainly doesn't bode well for value. And I don't think you want to find yourself in a position where you go into the season and then you're making a decision by the trade deadline. Well, if you're doing well at the trade deadline, you're not trading them. And if you are, then there's question marks are, well, why didn't you trade them earlier in the year? And so you look at the three guys. I would say, we've talked about this, Haas, that Connor Hellebuyck is the number one priority as far as figuring out a decision and potentially, signing an extension if he's interested in doing that. I don't think that's the case. I think Pierre-Luc Dubois is a very, very close second. Just because of, I think the value you could probably get from him. And then you're trying to figure out what the deal is with Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler. We know that this team tried to trade Blake Wheeler last offseason, didn't work out. Is it different this year after what teams saw from Blake? It's not really sure, but there is only 1 year left on the deal rather than two. And then Mark Scheifele. We've talked about this in the past. It seems very, very hard to imagine a long-term extension for him, but at the same time, can you completely rule it out? I don't know exactly what Mark Scheifele is looking for in his new deal. Will obviously play a factor. Whether obviously the culture of this team will play a factor, and how Mark Scheifele affects that. But it's some, I think we're if you were to ask me what I think the future holds here, I think we're looking at probably getting a Pierre-Luc Dubois trade first, probably followed by a Hellebuyck trade, and then probably followed by a Mark Scheifele trade, and that's that. And again, that makes it not all that surprising to see those three names and Blake Wheeler's name on a list of top 8. I'm assuming Blake Wheeler's the fourth guy there. It's not like a Nino Niederreiter or anybody.
It's Wheeler, which it kind of surprised me that he'd be that high just because of the value of the player and how difficult that contract is to move. But back to those comments from a guy like Dreger, saying that, hey, there's not an appetite for a rebuild. I think the most important thing, and this gets, I think this gets confused by a lot of people when we're having this conversation, is what is the definition of a rebuild? Like, I think when it is used in that term, at least as it pertains to the Winnipeg Jets, are they looking to go scorched earth and basically get to the floor and be the worst team in the league? Absolutely not. And to be honest, I don't think it's really possible with the talent that they would still have on this club.
Right.
But to me, if you're turning over those four players, that's absolutely a rebuild. Unless you're basically just trading apples for apples and getting other guys with 1 year left on the contract, which to me is not even a remote possibility, because that just doesn't work with this team right now. And to me, there's kind of two camps. I really think that the Wheeler and Scheifele deals need to be made. And I think that the organization feels that those guys need to be moved because they really do need to turn over from the past and move on with a new group of leaders, with a new dressing room. And whether you like it, whether you put a C on someone else's chest, whatever, those guys have been the alphas in the room and have run that room, and especially with Blake Wheeler for so long, that's just something that I think needs to happen. The other two are more, you're forced into it. I mean, I think the Jets would love nothing more than to have both Connor Hellebuck and Pierre-Luc Dubois as long-term members of their hockey club. But if that doesn't happen, then they sort of are forced to do it. Now, the reason I bring this up is that to me, there is sort of a deadline, and that deadline is, the Wednesday of the draft in Nashville. Because as soon as that doesn't happen, you get through draft week, the picks are used, teams make other moves. You go to a very light free agent group this year, which actually might play into the Jets' hands. I mean, as far as the timing to trade those players. But I mean, I could actually see Dubois coming back next year and being a Jet for the majority of the season and having him traded at the deadline. And I could even make an argument that the value of Pierre-Luc Dubois at the trade deadline might be as much, if not more, than it is right now. But again, do you want to be dealing with that all year? Probably not. And you certainly don't want to be dealing with that situation with those other two guys.
Feels like a lose-lose, doesn't it, though? Like, it feels like it's like if you bring Pierre-Luc, and I see what you're saying, but even if you're right about his value increasing by the trade deadline, I mean, are you holding on to him so you can hover around the playoff line and potentially trade him at the deadline? Like, or are you keeping him to push for wherever imagine the Jets were in a similar situation this year. Imagine they do get rid of, say, a Mark Scheifele and a Blake Wheeler. Say things do turn around. Say they do pick up a couple different players. All of a sudden you're maybe not first in the Central, but you're second or third, and you're in fight for the first.
And you got to
trading Pierre-Luc Dubois at the deadline, like it to me, it's bananas. And I think, you know what, the biggest takeaway for me is, and I'm not trying to raid on the parade of maybe a mass exodus here, but like not one of those guys even said how much they like playing here. Even suggested,
they didn't thank the fans
an
or anything
ounce
like
of
that.
interest of an extension, right? And you can do that. You can, like you have Austin Matthews doing that, in Toronto, talking about how he, even if you don't like, not one guy was interested in saying that he was in, wanting to be in Winnipeg, that he liked his time here, that he could see himself here in the future. You can do that as a business strategy, right? I mean, you can do that to tell to get curry favor from fans, right? You don't even have to be telling the truth, but the fact that nobody was even interested in whispering an interest of sticking around, that tells me Kevin Cheveldayoff is already knee deep in this. There's already teams talking. There is no maybe this guy's on the roster for next year and all this. And whether you want to call it a rebuild or a retool, I don't know. Maybe a Nino Niederreiter is your example of the potential of being a retool, where you're bringing a couple extra guys, and maybe if things don't work out at the trade deadline, you're shipping him out. But I don't think of the four guys we're talking about, how you can have any of those guys with the feeling that maybe you make it, maybe you don't, and then you're forced to make a move or risk losing the guy altogether, heaven forbid, if your team's actually doing well.
Okay, so let's get back to this, whether we want to call it rebuild, retool. I mean, if you're trading your top two centers and your Vezina caliber goalie and the guy that's been the leader and the captain for the last 10 years, to me, that would absolutely be rebuilding or retooling or whatever. It's massive and it's very, very significant. Considering this is the Winnipeg Jets, this is not just random NHL team with the challenges that Winnipeg has just in building a team in free agency with players that have Winnipeg on the no trade list. What if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff? You've come to grips. We're trading these guys. Jeff, what are you thinking about the ask? Like, what needs to be in a package coming back to Winnipeg for it to make sense to pull the trigger on players that will have quite a bit of interest around the league. Like, to me, when people say they're not looking to rebuild, what, you're just going to trade Pierre-Luc Dubois 1-for-1 for some other player that's going to come in with an extra 2 years on his deal? I mean, to me, and I don't think there's many people that would disagree with me listening to this or with us here on YouTube right now. To me, what the Winnipeg Jets need to do is identify younger players, finishing up ELCs, under team control, and potentially include a pick or two where essentially you're getting a player that comes in, and you have to acknowledge that it might be a short-term step back, but a player that you think has the potential to at least grow in the near future into a guy that can be in some of the roles that the players that you are trading. It gives you cost certainty. It gives you years under team control, which are more important here than they are everywhere else. I mean, to me, I don't see any other way of doing it. And, to suggest that the Jets would, be trading a Scheifele or, I mean, I know we were talking about like an Elias Lindholm. Well, Elias Lindholm has 1 year left on his deal too. Like, I don't think, hey, he's a great player, but I mean, unless he says beforehand that he's down with an extension and you get it done, which I highly doubt would happen, to me, there's only one way that this goes, and that is with younger players, prospects. It might be some highly drafted players that just haven't popped yet at the NHL level, and we've talked about a few of those guys lately, but I mean, that's the way it has to happen, right?
Absolutely. And so to kind of, there's a couple different things. I mean, the one thing is the difference between a retool and a rebuild, like to your definition, like a rebuild is actively doing things to tear down your organization. You're selling off everybody. You're selling off players with contracts still left on their deals. And so in that case, you would not only be getting rid of all 4 guys, you'd be looking for suitors for Kyle Connor. You'd be looking for you might keep a Josh Morrissey because he might be good for the room, or to give kind of other players, just not to be a complete, disaster, if you will. But I think you're totally right. I think that's where the scouting staff really needs to come into play here. That's where, you're not looking, because the reality is you're not probably trading, a Pierre-Luc Dubois or a Mark Scheifele, or a Connor Hellebuck for a par player, right? Especially not a non-par player for, who has term left on their deals, right? I mean, or it's going to be a lesser player for sure. It's definitely not going to be on par. You're not going to be, do you want to trade for a bunch of picks, right? Because that's not giving you anything right now. And so to your point, Huss, what the staff, the scouting staff, the various advisors that they employ around the NHL, it's up to them to determine and find out guys who are 23, 24, 25 years old, who may just, maybe haven't done a whole bunch at this level, but they are projecting to be better. And so that your window isn't 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the road. Maybe it's 1 or 2 to retool within these guys' contracts. And, I look at it, and obviously there's been a lot of attention paid to the Montreal Canadiens and wanting Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then the conversation automatically turning to, well, why would they give up anything of value, or high quality to get a Pierre-Luc Dubois who will be gone in a year, most likely, and all those things. So you start looking at players. So you start looking at some guys, prospects, guys that are in the Montreal system, and you look at guys like Justin Barron. Could Justin Barron be a piece that they could bring back? That's obviously, Morgan Barron's younger brother. He's potentially a top 4 D-man. You look at guys like Joshua Waugh. That's a guy who could potentially be, pieces. And you have to add on these guys, right? So there's other guys. There's Lucas Condotta, if I'm getting that name right. There's a guy by the name of Xavier Simoneau. These are guys that are under the radar players in Montreal that if you add them all up, maybe throw a couple 3rd round picks into it, or, a couple picks into it, maybe as a sweetener, you start creating a bit of a package where you start creating competition and value in different areas. Again, it's not going to be as highlighted as a potential number 1 centerman, but maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of those guys pop off. and get better. And that's how you incrementally get better as a team. So that's where the work needs to be put in to create packages to identify that. So when you do give away those guys, and fans might be, who the heck is this guy? Or why didn't you get 2 first-round picks for this guy? Or why didn't you get, the rest of the team's top picks for the next 5 years? It's because they picked these other guys out that I think could be a big deal. And the other part too, and sorry, Hudson, I know you're about to ask something, but maybe even with that, you start looking at Montreal and switching first-round picks, because all of a sudden 5th isn't as great as 1st or 2nd, right? And so maybe there's some movement there. Again, we'll see what happens.
The 5th round pick was on the table. I think they would do what it took to get that. I'm just not sure that they'd be willing to move off of that.
Jets,
yeah,
as part of that package, because you want more than just the 5th round overall player. Well,
they have the Florida pick. This year. They have the Florida pick too, and I could see that coming along with the player. And I mean, from people that I've talked to, the one guy that when things were being talked about last year that the Winnipeg Jets had their eyes set on is Caden Gooley. And Gooley was picked in the first round 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Played his first year. Well, he's off the board.
He's the future of Montreal.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why nothing got. And
they also wanted Nick Suzuki. He's the captain of the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Here's the thing about if they. Because there is a risk to say, oh, we'll just let you go back and don't worry, he's going to come here. I mean, I do think that there would be a number of teams that'll be interested in Dubois right now to get him in there. And you know what?
And one of those is going to be Montreal for sure.
Montreal.
Well, Montreal's not taking this idea that he'll be around in a year from now. They want
exactly.
Him.
Like,
they want
can you imagine? There's a team in their division, a big rival of theirs, the Boston Bruins, who potentially could be without Krejci and Bergeron, their top 2 centers. Basically, exactly what's happening here in Winnipeg. You don't think that if Dubois sets foot in Boston, likes the city, hell of a great team and an organization, and gets a nice off. I mean, it could backfire so spectacularly on Montreal if that sort of a scenario happened. I think it is incumbent on them to come to the table with a legitimate offer that makes the Winnipeg Jets feel like they're doing well for their club going forward and not being forced into taking something for 50 cents on the dollar. And to me, that is the job of Kevin Cheveldayoff right now, to try to engage other teams that feel that they might have the opportunity to keep Dubois around longer than he seems to be willing to stay here in Winnipeg. And if that is the case, then, stick that to Montreal and say, you guys are going to need to up your offer if you really want to get this done. Because I will say this, if they're able to do it and not trade Kirby Dach to the Winnipeg Jets as part of it, and get Pierre-Luc Dubois, that Suzuki, Dubois, Dach center ice position looks pretty darn good going into next season. And here's the other thing, Jeff. There has to be a want inside Montreal to actually be a competitive team this year. I mean, they've struggled through the last couple seasons, and maybe they were able to do it coming off that miracle run to the Cup final a couple years ago. But I don't believe there's an appetite to just continue. Like, this is not a Blackhawks situation right now. They picked number 1 overall last year. They're going to have a high pick this year. I mean, it's time to start waiting to get back to the playoffs and be a competitive team. And you would hope that along with potential other suitors, might be able to get the value up to a level that Kevin Cheveldayoff feels comfortable pulling the trigger on.
Look, I think if you were asked Pierre-Luc Dubois and he was to tell you the complete truth, he'd want nothing more than to create a legacy with the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, I've had conversations with him. He didn't say exactly that, but he did say that, anyone who's French-Canadian wants to play for the Montreal Canadiens. It's just, that's the way it is. It's not, like anyone else who might have, it's like, you can liken it to European soccer or whatever. I mean, you bleed that, you bleed that team as a kid. And again, I think he would want to see his name up there with all the other greats in Montreal Canadiens. But make no mistake, I think Pierre-Luc Dubois would go to several other teams, whether it be a Boston Bruins. Could you not see him easily sliding into a Boston Bruins lineup in the way he plays? I mean, he screams Boston. I mean, I think he probably wants to go to a contender, but what's stopping them? And I know they're in a bit of money trouble. What's stopping the Philadelphia Flyers from going after a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois? I mean, I'll tell you what it is. John Tortorella. But other than the obvious, I think he's a guy who would go to a contender. right? I mean, you go to a team that there's a lot of teams, like you said, that would call on a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois for his style in which he plays. That being said, I think Montreal is very aware of that. I don't think Montreal is taking a stance of, maybe we'll get him in a year from now. They like to build around, I wouldn't be surprised, and this is kind of like maybe gets a little bit conspiracy theory here, but I wouldn't be surprised if Montreal was going after the likes of, a Pierre-Luc Dubois, Alex Lafreniere from New York Rangers, a guy who apparently needs a coach who can help him, develop. Is there a better coach to do that than a Marty St. Louis? Probably not. And so I do, but I also think that Montreal is in a pretty interesting situation. And that situation is they got a lot of guys on LTIR that they need to shed that money. They don't have a ton of space to be, signing guys long term. So that's going to come to, fruition here soon, right? If Carey Price still hasn't decided what his future is, he's certainly not going to retire, right? I heard one guy has told me that, start thinking about, a lot of it's been talking about, some of his off-ice issues, for why Carey Price isn't, doing what he's doing, and some of the substance abuse stuff like that away from, the game or whatever, it's keeping him out. You're going to start hearing a lot about his knee soon, right? Because it's going to be focused on his knee for insurance reasons. And there's certain like with LTR, IR, it helps in a lot of ways, but there's certain tiers of insurance that conflict with one another, and the premiums go up as you get deeper into those things. It's a very convoluted thing, but that's the situation with Montreal. So before they even go after a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois and are interested in signing him long-term, they're going to have to take care of some contracts in-house. So that's going to be kind of your first little hint on whether Montreal is positioning themselves to make a significant move or not, is going to have to be taking care of that kind of business before they start going after a guy and then ultimately sign him to a long-term deal. But as far as Pierre-Luc Dubois goes, I mean, I really do think there's opportunities to go to other teams, and the Jets aren't just going to they've shown a resistance to not just give in to whatever you want. They're not just going to hand over Pierre-Luc Dubois to Montreal because he's interested in playing there. They're going to do what's ever best for the Winnipeg Jets, whether that's getting him on another team for one season or a team that maybe does a sign and trade or whatever. The reality is the biggest thing is if whether or not Pierre-Luc Dubois wants to be here. We don't really get that feeling. It's quite obvious that he's going to be moving on. You can't really sit on this for too long, and you can't really wait for the Montreal Canadiens to be that suitor if it's not exactly what you want in return.
Yeah, just on that LTIR, I mean, they had over $20 million on LTIR.
That's what I mean. Like you get into
the good thing is though, 10 is off the books though now. Like Monahan's contract is up and Paul Byron's up at the end of the year. So you're talking about that massive 10-5 for Carey Price for the next 1, 2, 3 seasons. So that will be an issue. But I mean, that probably isn't going to change whether it's next year or the year afterwards. So they essentially have to manage that and figure it out. But as I said, it is quite juicy considering everything that we've heard about Montreal and Dubois and what that's done to, his situation here in Winnipeg. The thought of Dubois just filling the footsteps of Patrice Bergeron in Boston and haunting them for the next 10 years in the National Hockey League. Hammer, this has been awesome. I guess back at training camp this week. What do you got cooking in the free?
I got a couple things on the go. I got my CFL rundown column. I'll be rejoining camp on Thursday and working throughout that, not throughout the whole weekend, but yeah, lots of Bombers, lots of Jets off-season stuff, and whatever else is tossed my way. You know how it works.
Well, we may need to have an off-air meeting outdoors involving a beverage or two very soon.
I'm not against that.
I'll send my people will discuss with your people. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for doing this, buddy.
Thanks a lot, Huss. Really appreciate having me on, and shout out to the viewers. You guys, you make the show. Take care.
The chat was popping during that one, Hammer. You always bring it. That was great stuff with Jeff Hamilton, and something tells me we'll be having a few more conversations like that. We actually are going to get to that athletic trade bait board in just a minute, but of course we were just talking Bombers with Hammer, and Bombers season is just about here. Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the hosts of the always growing and incredibly popular Princess Auto tailgate zone before every Blue Bomber game. Visit the Princess Auto tailgate before you head out to see the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and visit Princess Auto at one of 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, and you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Well, the buds are popping right now. Grass is getting green. And if you have irrigation needs for your property, I got a guy for you. We got a guy. We got a team. It's the Consolidated Supply team and our pal Joe down at Consolidated Supply with irrigation systems, artificial turf for your property. Not to mention they are the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba with new and used golf carts for all sorts of needs and other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchen options as well as small engine parts and repair. Consolidated Supply has their new showroom open to the public at 1395 Niagara Road East. Pop down and see the fellas there and how they can help you on your projects, or find out more online at cte.ca. Well, banging tent sale at Royal Sports on the weekend, and I have a feeling we'll be getting a few more of those. If you didn't manage to get the incredible savings on thousands of pieces of merchandise and shoes at Royal on the weekend, make sure to pop by there very soon for another one. But as of right now, I mean, you'll have great deals and sales coming out of the tent sale every day at Royal Sports. As Manitoba's #1 sports superstore with the biggest and best selection of licensed team gear around, and spring stock arriving daily with soccer, baseball, softball, tennis equipment, and a huge selection of bikes as well. Get ready to dominate spring and summer at Royal Sports. Get on down today at 750 Pembina Highway, and make sure you're following them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and, of course, sale information like the big tent sale that happened this weekend. We got a Game 7 tonight, which we'll get to in a minute in the Coolbet lines. Best place to gather with friends and watch Game 7? You know it's always your local Boston Pizza. Enjoyed ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings, gourmet pizzas, and the latest from the BP Fanalytics feature menu. And, of course, if you're staying in for the game tonight, you can always order online at bostonpizza.com. Don't forget ASD today, Monday. It's a week today. Assiniboia Downs opening race of the year. Darren Dunn's going to join us, I think, on Thursday to preview the season. And Kirk Contois, our pal Kirk, who dropped Mage as his winning horse tip for the Kentucky Derby that came through at 17-1. Kirk's going to be back getting us ready for the Preakness on Friday as well. But make a plan. Live racing begins next Monday at Assiniboia Downs, and can't wait to start picking head-to-head with Remis on next week's shows on Days of Live Racing. All right, let's get Remo back in here. And Remo, it was always fun to have Hammer on. He's one of our favorites. We did get a good taste of Bomber training camp, which I think we kind of knew what to expect. But that last conversation we had, once we start getting down to trade possibilities for members of the Winnipeg Jets, always guaranteed to get the chat going.
Oh, yeah, and I even put out a poll there just midway through. You brought up Dubois. I wrote to the chat, is he getting traded to Montreal? 58% of the people who responded said no, and you're getting a lot of, we'll just trade him to the best team. And if you're a team acquiring Dubois, I think you have to realize that you maybe won't sign there long-term, or you're going to have to put full court press on to resign him. For Montreal, I don't know why they would give up significant assets for Dubois when they could could sign him next year. I guess they want first dibs on trying to sign him.
That's a big risk, man. I mean, they're really. I mean, I keep on using this Boston example. Can you imagine if they said, no, don't worry, we'll just do it next year, and then he goes to Boston and signs with them, and they got to be playing against him for an 8-year contract?
One thing about Dubois too, I mean, I agree with you there. I also say I don't know how he fits in to their plan. Like, when are they going to start actually trying to win? Because they're currently in tank rebuild mode. Now, they have 5th overall this year, but I guess I think it's
this year.
If you have him and Nick Suzuki, it would be this year. So,
well, and Doc. I mean, if we're talking about getting a piece or two in a first-round pick and not getting Kirby Doc back, I mean, I'm sorry, but if you have Suzuki, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Kirby Doc as your top 3 centers, that should be a playoff team if you're not completely strapped at other positions. And I think you can make an argument that the Canadians are certainly ready to at least compete with those teams on the periphery. I mean, we saw turnover this year already with Pittsburgh and with Washington not making the playoffs. As some of those teams go down, we've got big questions about the Islanders who are in the playoffs. I think Buffalo's going to be challenging next year for a spot. I think Detroit will be. But I think there's an appetite to get back to winning or at least being competitive as opposed to the tank show we saw this year for Connor Bedard.
Yeah, the one player that kept coming up in trade talks, it's fun to play fantasy hockey, Huss, and just come up with wild trades. But everyone in chat was saying, make sure you get Justin Barron thrown in, Morgan Barron's brother, and how great would that be? We're seeing the Stahl brothers going to the conference final with Florida. Wouldn't it be nice to have the Barons here? I don't know. We did see their parents at a game. We could have more parents shots, too, next time the Jets are in the playoffs, because we didn't see any Jets parents in the playoffs. We only saw Golden Knights parents.
Yeah, no, Mark Stone, the Stone family, a Winnipeg family, and maybe that's why they're doing it. They certainly had that shot of the Stone family, at least against Winnipeg. Yeah. Did he get much airtime in the Edmonton series?
Well, it wasn't in Winnipeg. It was in Edmonton, so I'm not sure. They definitely didn't show Stuart Skinner's parents because he's from Edmonton and playing for the Oilers in the playoffs. So I feel bad actually saying that, but that was a tough one. But no, I didn't see anyone's parents yesterday. I think that maybe that's a first round storyline, showing the parents.
That
I'm not a TV executive, so I don't know, but I haven't seen any parents. No. Maybe the Stahl, although I'm sure the Stahl parents will be shown if they're there.
Without a doubt. Okay, we talked about this a little bit off the top, but let's get to this athletic trade bait board.
Okay.
Because Michael Russo and Eric Dahacek have put together a group of players that, how did they determine? I'll just read this to you, right? These are the first couple paragraphs. As the Leafs begin their postseason autopsy following their loss to the Panthers and determine the future of their core four, another Canadian team has already been at it for weeks, trying to handle the future of its own Big Four. This could be a summer of upheaval in Winnipeg, which is why the first edition of the Athletics off-season trade board needs to be heavy on the Jets. Now, it goes down through the season that the team had, the unique contract situations, the inability on Dubois to get a deal done, and what we heard from Connor Hellebuyck at the end of the season. But as you're seeing right now on the screen, the off-season trade board starts with two members of the Winnipeg Jets. Number one on that board is Connor Hellebuyck with his 1 year remaining on his contract at just above $6 million. And number two on that board is Mark Scheifele, coming off a 42-goal season with 1 year left at just about an identical, I think he makes, about $40,000 less than Connor Hellebuyck, in the low $6.1 million range. And, William Nylander is second. William Nylander is third. Erik Karlsson is fourth. Kevin Hayes, which is somewhat interesting, at fifth, considering that he's 31 and the amount of money that he makes, signed till the end of the 2026 season. John Gibson, Ducks goaltender, number 6. This goaltending seems to be in high demand. And then you've got Blake Wheeler at number 7 and Pierre-Luc Dubois at number 8. I will say it was kind of interesting that Wheeler's higher than Dubois. I'm not sure. I guess that's maybe on likelihood of being traded by their determinations. All I know, Rio, is that half of the top 8 players on this board are members of the Winnipeg Jets, which certainly speaks to the conversation we just had with Jeff and essentially the talk around this club really from the end of the season, actually far before it, knowing that this was going to be an off-season of change, whether the team wanted to or liked it or not. When it came to the assets that they have right now with the diminishing time on their contracts, something has to give. And if we can take it from the Athletics team, it looks like there's a lot to give right now when it comes to dealing around the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, people were asking me in chat how excited I was when this came out, and I got to be honest, I was extremely excited for rumor season.
Texted me this morning. Trade bait board is here. Let's go.
I texted you and Jeff. I'm like, get ready. It's because last year was just way too much fun doing Trotz Watch every day, and I made a joke after the draft it was Dubois drama, and we'll have to see if that continues. I was kind of.
Did you get a new logo for the Dubois drama from last year? Maybe we can fire it back up.
I'll bring up the logo. I'll have to swap out 2022 for 2023.
Just put in 2023. We're good.
Here,
we already have the Dubois already.
Here was this one. Yeah. One second. Let me find the logo. It was too good. Here we are.
There it is.
Time to break it out. It's time. Although I was surprised Hellebuyck was number one. Like, I think in terms of likely to be traded, Dubois is absolutely number one for me. I mean, although I'm not talking to agents and front office people, but it just seems like he's 100% came out and said, or at least his agent, I mean, it's been implied and reported that he's not re-signing here. So you have to trade him. And now it's like, okay, is it going to be this summer or is it going to be at the draft? And Connor Hellebuyck, it did sound a lot like he is ready for a change of scenery, ready for somewhere where they're going for a Stanley Cup. And so he would be attractive to teams. And they do mention in this article, sorry, let me see. They write Hellebuyck could get $9 million plus in the open market, and the Jets want young, team-controlled assets in exchange. And the New Jersey and Buffalo teams who are interested. And from Buffalo, team players like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Peyton Krebs, or Casey Middlestead, young players who you have control, would be interested in Connor Hellebuyck. And those are teams that need a goalie. Another team needs a goalie. LA Kings are expecting the Kings to be active. I'm curious what happens with Korpisalo. And I was thinking about Edmonton, who needs a goalie. Now, they didn't mention him. That's just me speculating, but that was interesting. And, you and Jeff also, as I go to the buffet, mentioned players not really saying, oh, I love Winnipeg. I love the fans. This is where I want to play. Player who's number 3 on the list, William Nylander, did say today, I love it here. I don't want to be anywhere else. And I agree. I don't think you heard that from the Jets. You heard from Hellebuyck. The mix.
We didn't even hear. Right. We didn't even hear anything like that.
Like, I mean,
a guy like Josh Morrissey did put an Instagram picture out thanking the fans for everything, but he was basically the only one. I think Lowry might have done that as well.
No, a lot of them did. I think Perfetti did. I'm trying to think who else. They put like end of year, but I'm just saying at that press. Press, only Nino was the one who came out and said, I think he was the only one. And I saw people in chat pushing back on that. I think Mike asked Shifley about playing with a team, one team his career, and he gave like an answer about it, but I don't think
he said how much he loves Steve Yzerman.
Yeah. That's what, right. So I agree. Like, wasn't like you're hearing from the Leafs today. It's funny comparing year-end press conference. Like Kyle Dubas came out today and said, oh, this is all on me. And, kind of is unsure if he says if he's going to be back with the team, it's going to be the Leafs. He's got to talk to his wife and see. But Tavares says, I like it here. I want to stay. Austin Matthews saying my intention is to be here. Sees a long-term future. Would like to sign an extension before the season. You just didn't get that for the Jets, which is why we're seeing, 4 of the top 8 on the Athletic trade board from the Jets.
This is part of the culture change that needs to happen with the Jets. And I mean, this can just be PR if it is. Teach the guys to say the right thing. But I mean, for a long time, and I mean, listen, I'll put Blake Wheeler as sort of the culture carrier for this. I mean, it has been a group of players, at least, I think the way that they've handled themselves, it's almost like there hasn't been a lot of outward appreciation for the fan base that are there in the NHL's smallest markets there each and every night. There's been a feeling almost like we should be thankful to them for be willing to play in Winnipeg. And that is something that they, as an organization, need to get past. And I think that they enabled a lot of it, in earlier years. And in some ways, it was a creation of their own. But this team, this organization, this franchise, to go forward healthy, to rebuild some of the connections with their fan base, they need to have guys that'll come out, give an honest effort 100% of the time, and at least act like they're happy to be here, to say those right things. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened enough. And when you have that same group for so long, listen, winning can change a lot of things, but they didn't. So now you've got a group of fan base that I think for the most part is not just willing, but excited to move on from these players to try to maybe create that, that next generation of Winnipeg Jets that hopefully will at least outwardly like being part of our community a little bit more, actually appreciate what the fans do for this team each and every night and the ones that are paying the freight. And I hate to say it, but, starting with the leadership of this group for a number of years, at least to me, that's never really come out at all. And I think it's important for guys like Morrissey and guys like Lowry, as well as some new players to come in and kind of to create that atmosphere around, because I think it'll be better for all parties involved. But this just goes back to that team. And we had the conversations the last couple of years, which, the Jets themselves, I mean, at times they were almost seemingly an unlikable team, which is crazy when you think about the athletes that they have on it and individually how those people are. But we certainly didn't get that as a team. And I don't want to pin it on one guy because I think it was a lot more to it. And I think the organization had a lot of kind of building that. But, people shouldn't be having, like, the Winnipeg should not have to apologize to people for them to play here in our market. You know what? They're in the National Hockey League. It's a great honor. You're getting paid a ton of money. How about put a smile on your face and embrace that, as opposed to, making all of us feel like we maybe owe them a little something extra because it's cold out here in the winter. It's freaking professional hockey.
Well said, Hustler. I see a lot of people agreeing with you in the chat here, and I agree there is an appetite for a bit of a reset. You've had the same group, and you're talking about a retool versus a rebuild. The contract situation kind of dictates, hey, you're going to have to switch things around. My question for you, and just looking at this list, like, do you think 4 of these guys start game? Like, how many of the 4 start game 1 of next season with the Jets? You think one of them remains, or all 4 of them?
There's a chance one of them do.
Is it Wheeler? Is that your one, or is it Scheifele?
Put it this way: I don't think they want it to be Wheeler
or Hellebuck even.
But I mean, listen, I would say there's still probably a better chance of Hellebuck being here. Like, listen, I don't think it's Mark Scheifele, and I think Dubois is going to be gone at some point based on what we know. Mm-hmm. So that probably happens now. Although, I think that if Scheifele came back and Wheeler came back, I mean, I think that you're just basically writing off another season. I think that they understand that, that change needs to be made. And I think that was completely apparent in the final couple months of the year. And that, I think, is why Rick Bowness said what he said and made a point of not just talking about Game 5, but talking about what happened in the last couple of weeks. Like, I would say, I don't know, you said that Dubois is the most likely to be traded. I actually would tell you Mark Scheifele is. Like, I think he is done here. And I could see potentially Dubois being here for the start of the year if they didn't get the offer that they think is fair and makes them the best, because they know they could trade him at some point this season. And I'll tell you what, at the deadline, although it would really be a blow to a team that, if you are like Jeff's example, I mean, if this team is in a playoff spot, let's say, and then you're trading Pierre-Luc Dubois, well, that's a real blow to the team and a blow to the fan base. But again, I think a lot of people would understand that they have to do it if this guy is going to be gone at the end of the year. But I think Scheifele's gone. I think the will to trade Wheeler is right there, although it's a hell of a lot harder. And, again, what sort of salary do they eat? What do they take back? I mean, the return for Blake Wheeler is very different than those other 3 players. Dubois, it's more situational. He's not going to sign, so you have to figure out when and what is the best offer for them. And then Connor Hellebuck, to me, Remo, is a much bigger issue because of the position that he plays, how good that he is, but also what that might be able to bring you back from a number of interested teams and suitors in and around the league. So that's sort of the way I see it. But I would almost say it is most likely that at least of the 3 forward, the skaters, I'd say it's most likely that 0 of those guys are back. I could be wrong on, say, 1. And then, as I said, we'll find out more about what's happening behind the scenes in these conversations with Connor Hellebuck. But I don't think it's a coincidence that he's number 1 on that trade list that was just dropped today.
Yeah, just you and Ken talked about it in the video on our channel from, I think, last weekend, where, he came out and said in that year end was like, well, maybe the mix isn't right, and talked about, not having many years left. He's 30 years old, and for Connor Hellebuyck and the Winnipeg Jets, if they want to, do you really want to re-sign a goalie, long term, on 30 years old? Like, is that the type of player you want to be giving out a long term contract to? And I don't know if that is, and you might be better off just trying to get as much value as you can. And if there's teams lining up for a top goalie like Buffalo or New Jersey, or who Pittsburgh needs a goalie, but I don't know if they keep trading away all of their picks.
Yeah.
like there's teams that need a goalie, and you might be better off just getting what you can and moving on. Because one thing's for sure too, we've all talked about how Hellebuyck has just masked so many of the defensive problems with the Jets. And, it's been great, but maybe there hasn't been the incentive to improve in areas where it's like, Hellebuyck, he's going to bail us out. He can stand on his head and make, 40, 50 saves. So I think certainly, and it does also has moved dollars from the goalie. And look at the playoffs, look at Vegas. I think they've been a great example of plugging pretty much any goalie in there. And if their forwards and defense play such a great structure, you can plug anyone in and they can win. And maybe the Jets are better off using that money on a forward, on a skater rather than a goalie.
Yeah, funny comment in chat here from Rob Mahoney. Andrew also wanted to trade Scheifele last summer. He wants it so bad. They should have. Look where that got us this year. I mean, he had this great, and listen, I guess his numbers goal-wise are better, but I mean, Rob, did you watch the last 2 months of the season? Did you hear Rick Bowness at the end of the year? You don't think that maybe that would have been a good idea? Trading him with an extra year on his contract and what that would have brought the team back? Listen, I'm sorry. The guy is selfish. The guy is not a great team player. He's certainly not a leader or a guy that you want to be putting the key, like the guy that's taking over. He was supposed to be that guy. I mean, everything was set up for Mark Scheifele to be that guy. We found out now he's not. And that's why he's in this list right now. The Winnipeg Jets thought that he was going to be their golden boy, the first ever pick, the guy that was going to sign, take us to the promised land. Remember Maurice putting up the statues? I'm sorry. We should be kicking, and they should be kicking themselves, to be honest, too, because they knew this. This had been in their face for the last couple seasons. And unfortunately, even with all the incredible talents that he brings to the table and the goals that he scored, what was the biggest issue when this team was falling apart at the end of the year? What the hell happened to 55? Where was he? He got moved to the wing. Your number one center, you're moving him to the wing at the end of the year? Listen, I'm sorry. We've talked about this tons. I was right. In November of last year, I was the first person in this market to bring it up, like, hey, maybe we need to start thinking about these things. And I don't want to be the I told you so guy, but if you're going to come at me on that, I was right. And a lot more people have figured that out right now. And I'll tell you what, they need to make a great deal. They need to bring in some assets that come in, and hopefully they're assets that are concerned with a lot more things than what they get, who they're playing with. The great team players, assets to a team. And I hope that they aren't spending all their time with Adam Oates too, for that matter. I hope rather they're spending time with their actual head coach trying to win hockey games as opposed to things on that. Anyways, I went off a little bit on that, but you know what I'm feeling about that.
Yeah, everyone's saying in chat, Rob putting on an A+ class there in trolling. He certainly got you. So
yeah. Well, no, listen. Because this is, and I mean, hey, there's nothing I want more than the team to do well and all that. But I mean, you can go back to the first time I brought this up on this show, and I mean, it wasn't that I was saying, maybe as strongly as the things that I'm saying right now. But listen, the spidey senses were tingling on whether this was going to be that guy moving forward. And that was when we had Pierre-Luc Dubois. I mean, if you had made that trade at that point, how different would the team look? How would the team chemistry have looked? Would we have missed the play? Would they have missed the playoffs last season and then tanked again in the second half of this season? I'm not sure. I mean, the guy can score. He'll do a lot of things. And I think wherever he goes, hopefully he will end up being, a teammate and he'll have learned some lessons, on what can really be part of a big thing. I don't believe that he was that concerned with that here. It was more about the name on the back of the chest than what was on the front. And so, anyways, we'll see what happens. I mean, he's done a lot, and I don't want to take this, too far. I mean, I think that's where he is right now as a player, but I also will acknowledge that he is one of the best Jets of 2.0 by far. Has had a great impact on this city and this community. But I think we realize, I mean, when you talk about being patient and waiting too long, this is the perfect example of this management group, probably getting a pretty good idea of what the issues were and thinking that maybe it would go away or maybe they could solve it. And I'll tell you right now, the return on Mark Scheifele this summer, when I think it's happening, is not going to be what it would have been a year ago or a year and a half ago. And if that was the case, I wonder how different the history of these last 2 seasons would have been. And I certainly know Rick Bowness would probably have a few less gray hairs as to what he had to deal with coming up last year. This is something we do got to get out. We've gone long here today. This is something that will definitely be hitting tomorrow on the program. We'll have Mike on. I'm very interested to see what he has to say about that. And as I say, this is just the first trade bait board of the year for us to get to. Oh, by the way, Ben Howard, preach us. Now tell us what happens to Helly. Well, I think the most likelihood, and again, all of you know, I think he is the franchise player of the Winnipeg Jets, and I would pay him the money. I would feel less. I would feel less concerned about giving Connor Hellebuck that deal that he absolutely earned and is going to get somewhere in the NHL. I mean, he's as reliable as any. He doesn't get hurt. He plays each and every night. Are there risks involved in giving a player at that age that many years? For sure. But I'd feel more confident with doing on a Hellebuck deal than I would be, for instance, on a Scheifele deal at 31. But again, it doesn't matter what I think because I'm not the one making the decisions. Hey, we got to get to the Coolbet lines and stuff tonight. But just before we do that, shout out to Jason Day winning on the tour this week. PGA Championship coming up. We'll have a couple segments for the big second major of the year coming up, and a big shout out to Breezy Bend out there on the weekend. It is absolutely gorgeous right now. Really looking forward to spending the summer out there. And if you want to get on the waiting list for next year for Breezy Bend for you and your family, give Corey Johnson a call over at the course or check them out online at breezybend.ca. And I know fishing started this weekend. Get your licenses, everyone, before you throw your lines in the water. If you're looking for a world-class fishing experience, just a couple hours from the city of Winnipeg, Aikens Lake is the spot. World-class fishing with even more world-class hospitality from the incredible people that run it. Great corporate outing or friends and family trip. They're about 90% filled for the year right now. So get to aikenslake.com right now if you do want to find out more information on joining us at Aikens sometime this year. And of course, beautiful weather all week, heading into the long weekend, which reminds me of Little Brown Jug, the great new generic lager, 1919. New summer beers coming out. Your best place to try it out is get on down to the brewery and tap room on William Avenue. You can also check them out on littlebrownjug.ca for everything you have going on. Citywide local delivery as well, but make sure you're stocking up with the good stuff. Manitoba and Winnipeg's favorite local beer, Little Brown Jug, for the upcoming weekend. Remo, before we go, let's get to the Coolbet lines and talk about this game tonight. Dallas and Seattle. Listen, I didn't have Seattle going to 7 with Colorado, and I certainly didn't have them going to 7 with the Stars tonight. Will this be the bounce back game from Jake Ottinger after he was given the hook in game number 6? Dallas is a minus 200 favorite. Once again, the Kraken a big underdog, but that hasn't stopped them so far. Plus 167 on the money line. Will the Dogs be barking tonight, or will it be Dallas and Vegas in the Western Conference Final?
The way road teams have won in this playoffs, Huss, and underdogs, I think you're probably better off betting Seattle, but at plus 167. So, I mean, if you want to just go with the math and the value bet, I would probably do Seattle, but I don't think I've been picking against them all the time. I don't think they're going. Money Puck has it 60% Dallas, which is kind of high. Do have the better goalie and Ottinger, I think. I just think they're the better team, but Seattle keeps doing it. And I like what Tom said. They don't have anyone bad. They just have 4 solid lines they can roll out. I mean, you don't know on any given night who's going to step up and be the scorer. I'm picking Dallas, but I think Seattle's a better value bet.
Canes and Panthers series line is up right now. Canes are the favorite, -130. They'll have home ice advantage. And the Florida Panthers +110. I did put together a little exclusive for today, though, in the lock shop. If you click on the partner parlay, it's the Ride with Huss. I am taking Dallas to win. I think this is going to be a big bounce back game for Jake Ottinger. I'm saying that Seattle scores 2 goals or less. I've got Rupee Hintz scoring 2 points tonight, and I've got Joe Pavelski scoring a goal. So this is a big one. This is a big swing. It's 9-1 +900. Pavelski goal, 2 points or more from Hintz. Kraken to score 2 or less, and the Stars to win +900 right now at the Lock Shop Partner Parlay. There's no value in just betting the Stars at -200, Remo.
No.
So we had to have a little fun with the nice exclusive, and the fellows gave us a nice number on that one.
That is nice. I actually was going to say Joe Pavelski's for sure scoring. That's all he's done since he's come back. Big playoff performer. Rupee Hintz. You didn't, if he was underrated before this playoffs, he certainly had a breakout. Love that goal he scored. Was it not the last game? I think the game before, where he was in front and he just did that little one touch to himself and just roofed it from in close. And yeah, you're going to need Jake Ottinger. So you're betting on the Stars. The one star who hasn't showed up for Dallas, Jason Robertson. He had over 40 goals in the regular season. The panel on Sportsnet was talking about him just gripping his stick too tight and not really feeling it. I wonder if he breaks out at some point because he's a really good player. And I mean, Dallas, they got, you talk about New Jersey getting there this year and being like Ken said on Friday, the Winnipeg Jets of 2018. I think Dallas, they have so many young players in Robertson, Hintz, Ottinger, Heiskin, and they're going to be here over and over for the next couple seasons as well. So I think Dallas Vegas would be a great series. I don't want to see Seattle. 2 expansion teams makes you want to throw up us. So let's go with Dallas. A real hockey city like Dallas, right? Or is Carolina the most hockey city? Their most recent cup winner of the 4 remaining.
That is actually hilarious. I mean, when you think about this, I guess the Panthers the oldest team of that group?
Well, technically Carolina because it includes Hartford.
Yeah, but we're not talking about Hartford. We're just talking about those.
Oh, and in that market, yes,
those
the Panthers
teams in that market
would be the oldest team from '93 because Carolina was like '96. Yeah, that's funny. Although Seattle gets snow, so I could think, and they support Thunderbirds. They like hockey Pacific Northwest, so I think that is a pretty good hockey market.
Well, no, it is for sure. I got nothing against the Kraken. I mean, I think they're a great story right now. But I am sort of with you. Like, can you imagine a Kraken Vegas Western Conference final guaranteeing one of the expansion teams in it? Being said, Dallas is in our division. I don't have a lot of love for Dallas, although I do like some of the players on their teams, and I am obviously backing them tonight in the Ride with Us exclusive.
Vegas, 4 conference finals in their first 6 seasons, and it's kind of funny. I'll give credit to the NHL here for getting in on Vegas early because, they moved the Raiders there, the A's. I don't know what's going on with their stadium. I think they finally got a deal, but I was talking to my cousin who was just there for games 1 and 2 of the Jet series, and he was saying how Vegas fans, they feel like the Golden Knights franchise is actually theirs and not like the other ones, Raiders and A's, who are just brought there to make money. Vegas, I think they feel more of a connection to the hockey team there, and I think that's kind of cool.
No, that is good. Brass Bonanza, talk about Hartford. Sorry, Brass Bonanza. I did not mean to besmirch the great legacy of the Whale. And then waiters, how about those Lakers and Heat, 2 7 seeds? Heat were actually the 8th seed. They beat the number 1 Milwaukee Bucks in the first round. Incredible. Yeah, Celtics moving on, and the Lakers beating the Warriors on the weekend. So we've got, actually, speaking of which, is that game one tonight? Do we have? Oh, no, we don't get. Lakers and Nuggets begin on the 16th, so that's Wednesday.
Tomorrow.
And the Heat and Celtics. It was today. Oh, yeah, today's the 15th. Oh, yeah, so tomorrow, Lakers and Nugs. And then Wednesday, Heat and Celtics. I see we've got some draft props now.
And there was
for the NBA as well.
And it sounds like the NHL is going to be a bit of a break. I saw Ken Bolke from Sinbin Vegas who's saying Friday for the West Final. That's what he's saying. All indications coming my way Friday for Game 1. Nothing is set in stone, and I haven't seen anything.
Starting on Wednesday.
He says
Yeah,
Wednesday.
we don't have a number. Yeah, we don't have a date yet for Carolina, Florida.
Yeah.
They should. Okay, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to spend time complaining about.
He says
dates for
Wednesday or
games and
Friday.
times
Well,
for
the
games.
NHL schedule, like when they scheduled that Oiler game, announced the date and then changed it. The Oiler Vegas.
I guess they don't want to get burned again on that, and it may have to do with some building availability. Well, the Mavericks aren't playing right now, and actually, I don't even think they play in the same rink anymore. Are the Stars and the Mavs in the same arena?
American Airlines.
Center?
I think they do.
Probably.
I think they do.
And the Kraken have their own, but regardless.
Yeah, I'm just reading. ESPN is going to do the West Final, TNT doing the East, and so the Panthers and Heat alternating nights on TNT. So no Panthers Heat conflicts for fans out there.
What a time to be a South Florida sports fan right now. Good stuff. Anyways, folks, great to see you all back, and we missed a few of you live last week. Great to see you here. And, certainly Jets conversation, Ice back at it. Game 3 tomorrow. We'll have something on that. Bomber training camp. It's no shortage of topics for us to get to on Winnipeg Sports Talk right now. Again, a huge thanks to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. By the way, if you want to play at Coolbet and you haven't before, use that promo code WST for a 100% deposit up to $200 on your first deposit. That exclusives in the lock shop section in the Coolbet exclusives. Other than that, enjoy Game 7 tonight. We will talk about it tomorrow, a little bit more on the Jets offseason with Mike McIntyre, get his thoughts on, some of the trade targets the Winnipeg Jets might have. And, now that people are, now that Edmonton and Toronto's out, at least the Canadian media will be more focused on the offseason. So I think that'll turn into a little bit more scuttlebutt for us to get to talking about the Winnipeg Jets here on WST.
Oh, yeah. Toronto's out. So, okay, here's the new TSN trade bait board.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's go. Folks, thanks again. Enjoy the weather. Get outside. Get the barbecue going. Enjoy Game 7 tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock p.m. Central, live on YouTube. Hit that red subscribe button. Well, this is Winnipeg Sports Talk. Have a great night.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.